We are here, the 1000th episode of the Comics in Motion podcast, and we have got a fantastic episode for you. We've got listener questions, we've got a very nice comment from one of our family members, we've got loads of cool stuff. But before we delve into any of that, we need to introduce our guests. Obviously, I'm Mike of the Star Wars Comics in Canon podcast, but that's not who you're here to listen to. Primarily, you're here to listen to the other 4 individuals we're involved with. So let's start off with Mr. Tony Farina. I'm going in backwards order. Mr. Tony Farina, who is a part of the Comics in Motion family, obviously of Indie Comic Spotlight, and a published author of Welcome to Mansfield. Very exciting things there. So lovely to see you, Tony. We've also got Max Byrne. How are you doing, Max?
I'm marvellous. I'm very glad to be here with 4 such kind and distinguished gentlemen.
I should have let you introduce, because your introductions are legendary. You know, The marvelous mandatory Max is just absolutely incredible. But, you know, with both Tony and Max, we jumped on this bandwagon a little bit later. You know, there was about 2 years of history for this podcast before either of us got involved. And it's because of those 2 years of history that ourselves actually got involved. So it's my pleasure to obviously put the celebrations on for Chris and Dave, the podfathers of the Comics in Motion family. So Chris and Dave, how are you both doing?
Very well. Great intro as well, Mike. Thank you.
Very good, sir. Good to be here.
Amazing. Well, we got lots to get through, but I thought the best place to start is for mainly me to be quiet for a bit, and for Chris and Dave to talk about how the Comics in Motion network, really the podcast got started, and then how that kind of blended into the network, the family that it is today. So I know yourselves have had, as we spoke on Genuine Chit-Chat a while ago, of the podcast graveyard of yourselves. So we don't need the origin story of how you guys met, but maybe, because we'll be here all day otherwise, the bands and the other numerous podcasts and all that jazz. But for Comics in Motion, where did that idea start, and then how has that evolved up to the point where you decided to invite myself, Tony, and Max into the fray? So the floor is the two of yours.
Age before beauty, Dave, or would you like me to go?
Motherfucker. So let me think. I mean, for some reason, like a Family Ties style reminiscing episode or clip shows popped into my head. So, yeah, I guess the story starts with, obviously, you and I, mid-2000s, Chris, we were in a band together. We kind of dropped out of contact, really, just became like Facebook friends. And then independently, we both started off different podcasts. So Chris had started one on personal fitness and then moved on to more gaming. And I started one on like grassroots coaching. So I was managing my daughter's team at the time. And so there was nothing out there at that time. And there was a huge amount of US-based podcasts, but there didn't really seem to be that much in the UK. And so we kind of connected and, you know, got talking again through that. And then I joined Chris's podcast just to chat about the history with gaming and different gaming systems, computers and what have you. And something quite magical happened where we just had a chemistry that we didn't even know was there. Like, we'd got on and chatted, and I think probably bonded over the office quite often, didn't we? And so we just thought, you know what, we should do something. And so we spent probably a month or two just cooking up an idea of what we should do, and we landed on kind of looking at comic-based media, so things that, you know, originated from or are loosely affiliated with comics, but look at the original idea was movies, TV shows, and games. So we thought we'd cover the whole gambit. But we didn't do any, as Tony's signaling there, games reviews at all, because Chris and I were discussing that very quickly becomes chip shop sort of paper. You know, it's no good after a very short amount of time. So we carried on with the movies and TV shows for a while. And then I think it was probably in the second year where we started to reach out to other podcasters as well. That's where we met you, Mike, as part of the Britpod scene, if memory serves me. And then Max, I think you and Chris had met at a Comic-Con up in Manchester, because we thought we'd made it then, right? We got a free pass into a con. and we were like, we are now the shit. We're one step away from making this professional and doing this full time, baby. So, but anyway, and so yeah, I guess, and Tony, you'd reached out because you'd heard us and made us review Speed Racer, and then we got chatting. I think Tony, you're probably our fan number 0 who was initially talking.
I was there I was definitely there. I was listening on Podbean early days, and I don't know. I think I think it was the Losers episode was the first one I heard, and then I backed up.
Very
so Losers was like
YouTube.
Very popular on YouTube because you guys are huge assholes. But even though it does say this is not the movie.
This is bonkers. I literally had to turn the comments off because I had angry Spanish people saying this isn't the movie. We're not supposed to be
hundreds of thousands of people giving us loads of shit in various languages, and it's not the movie because you're trying to bootleg it on YouTube.
I want to ask you. I was going to ask Chris. So with obviously your multitude of podcasts, I know at the moment yourselves are very busy with Chris and Dave's Reality Cast and the VHS Strikes Back. They're kind of your flagship podcasts at the moment. You've left TV and movies in the dust. I'm hoping 2024 will be the year. I've tried to pitch it to Dave. I'm saying it on this pod, so hopefully all of our audience can get behind me. Once a month. That's all I'm asking. Just once a month. I know I love listening to you guys on VHS, and I do not listen to the Reality Cast, I'm sorry. But whenever I hear you two together, even when you came back for the Dr. Mordred thing, I was just like, I love it.
He-Man.
Oh yes, of course, the He-Man episode. Christmas special. I did listen to that, even though I've watched next to no He-Man. But Chris, when you were going into this podcast, obviously the idea was, you're a big movie buff and Dave's a comic nerd. Did you think this one was going to be any different, or did you think it was just going to join the podcast graveyard? You can be honest.
Well, to be fair,
it's been years down the line.
I didn't. It's actually 5 years at the end of this month, I think, since we started Superman 1. I've actually been watching Superman 1 this weekend in lead up to this. No, I think, to be honest, Mike, it was only when we started talking that I realised there was a graveyard of podcasts that I'd created, and never realised I basically erased my old podcast on the same feed. So it was just a disaster when I started doing podcasting. But no, we're just me and Dave. We've been really good friends when we were in the band. The Office and stuff. I'd helped Dave move a couple of times. We'd always been, me and David always linked together, even though there was that football divide, which we still ripped the hell out of each other on. But we always, I have everyone that I've been in the band with Dave. I'd always gone with Dave. We played football together, everything. And what's really random is my Facebook stuff comes up, and Dave will put a comment on from, say, 12 years, goes on there. And it's sometimes he's like reaching out, and I've just not even responded, being the wanker that I am. So, and I'm like, I feel really bad now. But no, it's just one of them. As we started going, I never forget, sat in the living room, 2 hours we watched the movie. And then I actually had the movie on while we reviewed it, and we thought we were going to have the podcast. And every time we podcast for the first 10 episodes or whatever it was, I had the film on. So we literally ran scene by scene. So you can actually hear me going, oh, and what about this, Dave? And then eventually we're like, Dave was doing the editing on that one at the time. And it was like, it was killing him. It was like 4 hours of editing. And then we had a rule, didn't we? Because Dave, which is really good, was like, he wanted his kids to be able to listen to it. So obviously Mr. Sweary here was not going to swear. So we didn't swear. And it wasn't a rule. It was just more a case of we wanted like a footprint so that people could listen to it. And I'd obviously swear every other word. But then once we got to about episode 50, Superman 3, all bets were off at that point. All bets were off. And I just took over being a bellend, basically. But no, I think podcast-wise, there's always ideas, Mike. And the two podcasts I've taken over, but we still feel guilty, both of us, about the comics emotion, because that was what cemented any chance of us even doing podcasting. So we do want to do it, and it's more, we record on a Saturday together, 7:00 in the morning. We're up, we're recording, we? Every Saturday. We have a chat for over an hour and a half before we even started podcasting, and then we podcast the VHS. Then on Sunday we'll do the reality one. But the reality one, at one point, we were doing it 7 days a week, and I would get sacked if anyone from work listened to the amount of work and podcast I was doing. It was ridiculous, like how we were getting around podcasting, because we were doing nearly 10 episodes a week. Daily.
The output there is just insane.
And I think that's what killed off doing the movies to a time, because we were just so exhausted. Because Dave was always really good at the editing, and I've learned off the back of it. Dave was good when he used to do all the music stuff years ago, but like I've learned to do. So I would do the reality stuff editing, and then the VHS we used to split between us. So it's just a lot of work. But no, I'd love it. I love the fact that we've created all this, and there's only one person you can thank for having so many people on the podcast network, and that isn't me. So it's Dave. Dave's really good. They're planning stuff, organizing stuff. He's really good.
But if I just go back to Mike's thing about the podcast graveyard, I think Comics in Motion is the first one. It's the first project that we had together, and we were so excited about it. And then we wanted to spend year one making sure we got the product right, making sure we were happy with how things sounded, the format. I'm just thinking as you're talking there, Chris, it was probably neither of us realized it at the time, but with you going through the movies, that was the first indicator about how we don't listen to each other sometimes. Because I'd be talking about something in minute 40 and you'd be like, oh, fucking hell, yeah, but what about this thing that's in the first 10 minutes? Oh, what the fuck are you talking about? But I do it as well. But we caught the bug, massively caught the podcasting bug. And so, as well as doing the comic stuff, we were so... like clockwork, every single week we would have that episode out, but then we outside of that we talk about other projects. So yeah, we obviously really love football, so we ended up spinning up a football one. Chris can tell us in a minute about his American one, where he thought it would be a good idea to talk about Man United in a Texan accent for some reason. But we'll talk about that later. So we just created all of these things, and then we realized, we can't sustain them. Once you've created all the social media stuff, and there's the bit that we love is just talking about something and then getting an episode out there. So you end up kind of consolidating stuff, and I think by the time we started thinking about this idea of expanding out Comics in Motion, I think we already had VHS. We'd already kicked that one up. The reality one was such a bizarre experiment, because it was literally like, let's jump on for 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to crap all over Love Island. Chris loves it. He's a super fan, so he'll go on about it. We already had those in flight, but I wanted to... So experimenting around, creating new things is where my mind tends to occupy that space most of the time. And I don't know what the trigger was. In fact, maybe it was a conversation we were having, Chris, about the football. And I started to think about, okay, well, what if there's a lot of independent podcasts coming out, but what if you had a number of different creators that were all part of one podcast? So it wasn't just a weekly, someone comes out, and we're not professionals, right? So we're never going to do a daily type podcast. We'll ignore the reality one, Chris, when we were doing that. But so I started to think about that now, and then you sort of your mind wanders a bit, and you think about innovating, but then you pull back a bit and think, okay, but what is actually practical? So it's not my day job, so managing anything it's not zero effort. So I thought, well, if we were going to do this, I'd want to make sure that we had, a solid group of like-minded people, because going back to the band days, I remember having this discussion loads that, being in a band is a lot of fun, but it's serious fun. If you just turn up and you haven't done your bit, you haven't learned your parts or thought about your parts, or you just want to turn up and have a few laughs, well, you can be in a band, sure, but not with me. You've got to be dedicated to your craft as well. So those were the types of minds I was looking for. So that's when I reached out to you guys. So Tony, Max, Mike, and I'd put in a bit of thinking time before. I think Mike, when we were doing the whole journey to Rise of Skywalker thing, it became obvious, that I thought I was the Star Wars guru, and I was like, oh fuck, I'm just a yellow belt. So, and then I started thinking, well, this would be a great thing to do, like a Star Wars based show. And Tony, I think initially we were talking about doing something DC related, because I knew you did the writing for DC Comics News. So, but you said, well, where my passion is really indie comics. So would that fit? And I'm like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. Max as well, you know, we were talking about doing stuff, and you said, well, actually, you know, really like to do the Marvel and DC stuff. So it was kind of a thing that gathered a bunch of momentum without having a real set out plan, just an idea and just having the conversations to get you to the next step. And so obviously, you know, we started off and then it's unbelievable. I never thought it'd get to be what it is. And obviously it'd be great, right, if we would get paid for this stuff, and that would also be awesome. But just the community, the thing that we've sort of created here, thanks for the homage there, Chris. It's not the David Brentism isn't missed on me. I'm just a chilled out entertainer. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. Can't even remember what the original question was.
It does. It does in a very great way. And I'll say that if anyone listening, you can go over to, I'm going to steal it and put it on YouTube, youtube.com/genuine chit-chat. I'll put this video version up there. When after the 1000th episode has aired on the main feed, that's the main place people are going to be listening, but check out the stuff in the description. But before I get on to Max and Tony's Comics in Motion origin story from their perspective, I've just got a really touching comment that I didn't want to save to the end and rush it. I didn't want to kick off with it. I thought this is the perfect time to say it. So it's from our good friend Steve J. Ray. So he just sent his little thing, so I'm just going to read it out, but this is all his words. This is from him. Thanks to the entire Comics in Motion team for releasing a whole host of different, original, varied, and hugely entertaining content. Chris and Dave haven't just launched a network, they've created a family. This is an incredible group of people who have become much more than broadcast partners. They've even become more than friends. I couldn't be prouder of this team or more honoured to be a small part of it. I can't wait to team up with the gang again in 2024 and hopefully even produce new content of my own again. Thank you, Comics in Motion. I truly love you. Which is very sweet. And obviously, we love you as well, Steve J. Ray. You're a superstar, and your knowledge of comics is almost I think the only person who could maybe go tit for tat with Steve is probably Matthew B. Lloyd on classic comics. I think if you combined their two knowledges together of Marvel DC stuff, I think the tag team of those two would probably be able to beat next to everyone that exists.
They could go on. They could definitely, if there was a comics Jeopardy or pub quiz or whatever, the two of them could take on everyone. They could take on, and Max and I are no slouches, but they would crush us, Max. Like,
unbelievable
to bones. Yeah, right.
Yeah, agreed. So speaking of that, let's delve in. So Max, we haven't heard much from you. So from your perspective, like, what was it like meeting Chris in the queue of a comic convention? Was he a bit of fun? Did he talk about his shoulder like he's known as doing? Or like how was meeting him for the first time, and how from your perspective did that kind of go into creating podcasts basically?
Yeah, I mean, God, it goes back to, I think it was 2018, I think was the year. And yeah, well, I mean, looking back on that sort of first meeting, it's a little bit disappointing that he didn't slip a shoulder injury story in there, really. You know, based on how he's been ever since, I'm quite disappointed that we didn't get off on the right foot there. But, you know, I got plenty in after that, I guess. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we'd Chris, like you said, him and David got press passes for Manchester Comic Con, and somehow so had I through one of the websites I write bits of nonsense for, and so we were just stood together in the queue waiting to get our press credentials, you could say, and just got talking. And there was his couple. I remember there was his weird other couple in that queue as well, Chris, who were like, I think they were professional cosplayers who took like professional photos of cosplayers with like publications in magazines or something. But I think the magazines
so what magazines?
a little specialist magazine, shall we say? Something
all right, like okay.
Yeah. I've never come across.
Have you got a link,
again.
Max?
No, sadly not. I wish I'd kept the guy's details, but no. Sadly not. No, they're probably both in prison by now. Let's be honest. But yeah, so I met Chris in the queue, and you know, got talked to. You know what Chris is like. He can.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, you can talk the high legs of everyone. So it was great actually, because I was there by myself. So it was nice to actually, meet someone, and we hung out for a bit as well. The sort of first couple of hours of the morning there before going our separate ways. And then Chris was like, yeah, you tell me about what you guys do. And he's like, yeah, you should come on. I was like, yeah, fantastic. Thinking this guy will never speak to me again. As soon as he's
just get rid of him.
As soon as my back's turned, I will literally never see him again in my life. So I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. It was nice anyway. But then lo and behold, sort of kept in touch. And then, you guys asked me to come on. I think it was a VHS Strikes Back, and we did, I think it was Terminator 2 we did. You had me on as a guest to talk about Terminator 2, so we had a good time doing that.
What a movie.
Indeed, yes. And then, when you guys said you were going to sort of expand your programming, and you sort of dropped me a line and asked me if I wanted to be part of it, and the rest is history. And then obviously I'll let Tony jump on in a minute, but we did that sort of that 2-part 4-way collaboration with that wonderful Crisis on Infinite Earths CW show. I think it was like a 2-part special we did. It was then the jump off into everything that's sort of come since. But
can I just tell a story about how when we met Max? Sorry, Max, going back. It was amazing the day. I remember speaking to you later on, Matt. You love this. So me and Max stood there, and then some R2D2 goes past remote control. Remember, someone comes down, and I was like blown away, thinking it's really him. It's real. Anyway, obviously, because we got press passes, one of the guys who was doing a speech was Nolan North, who does a lot of video game voices, especially Uncharted, and I love the Uncharted series. So I spoke to Max, and like you said, me and Max went off, and I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing. I'd never been to a Comic-Con. Dave, you couldn't make it, could you, Dave, up to Manchester the week? I think at the time you with the kids and that, and I was like, I'll go and blag it, I'll do it. And somehow I got into this interview with Nolan North, like with all the press. And every time I went somewhere, people were like really going overboard, talking to me. I've actually still got a set to my right of comics that I bought in a pack that's supposed to be for Dave. And I've had them for like 4 or 5 years, and I've never opened them. And they're still there. I saw them this morning. I was thinking, I need to send them to Dave. And I got them on that day. However, we end up in this room, right? And everyone has got the greatest reporting equipment ever. They've got like proper boom mics. They've got like dictaphones, everything. They've got massive cameras in frames with the full shebang. And I was like, I just wanted to sort of listen to Nolan North talk. So they asked him questions. I didn't have a clue. I asked him some really poor questions, and I've got my iPhone like this recording. And like, you can't see my phone. I was like that with my phone.
That's exactly what I did when I went in to speak to people. Yeah.
I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing here? I should not be here. I remember seeing you afterwards, Max going, I've just done an interview before. I just put my phone up like I was at a concert or something. I wasn't even recording. I just felt out of place because I wasn't doing it. So I was faking it till I make it. I've still not made it, but there you go. But yeah, I'll never forget that, Max. Speaking to you afterwards, I think you said that. I did the same because I felt well out of my depth.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I remember sitting in this little room with 2 guys from The Walking Dead, and like you said, everyone's there, like boom mics and things. I'm there pressing record on my phone, going, "Yeah, one of you's in Shazam, aren't you? Tell me about that," kind of thing. I've still got the audio saved on my phone, so I can prove it actually happened. But yeah, it's good days. Yeah, good days.
Great days. So sorry, mate. Well, let's think back. Max, don't forget the wrestling. Royal Rumble. We've done many Royal Rumbles, Max, haven't we? Me, you, and Dave, and that the wrestling together.
Oh, yeah.
That was another one, Mike. Wrestling Gold.
The old Wrestling Gold podcast.
I'm fully aware. I've got a list somewhere of all the podcasts yourselves have done, so fear not. But Max, just before we go to Tony, I did want to ask, so when you kind of started in the podcast realm, because as you mentioned, you'd been writing for a few different sort of comic review websites and things, and you've had experience interviewing, clearly. Seasoned interviewer over here. But when you first started in with Comics in Motion with mandatory Marvel and DC, like how was that for you? Because obviously, with myself as an example, I already had a podcast, and I was like, well, I loosely know what I'm doing, so I just kind of translate it in that regard. For you, had you had any experience in audio or podcasting, or was this like completely new? Because I will say, you do sound really professional on all of your episodes. I think from episode 1, if you checked, no shade on Tony, but I think if you checked each of our, like my genuine Chit-Chat first, Chris and Dave's first on Comics in Motion, all of them, I think yours might be the best intro episode. You just hit the ground running and went. So it's really you've got the best intros, and your own introduction to the podcast world is actually really good as well.
Well, that's coming from you. That's the highest of high praise, Mike. So thank you. But no, God, I was literally flying by the seat of my pants. Honestly, I was, so nervous, sweating my back off. Literally, by the time I finished that first one, I think my back was like moist for the amount I was sweating. I was so nervous, and just, I literally just made it up as I went along. Not what I was saying. Obviously, I'd done, written notes up beforehand and sort of points of things I wanted to.
So more than Chris has ever done for a podcast.
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you?
He's brought notes occasionally when he's really pissed. There's been notes.
2 lines.
I'm pissed. That's it. This is what we wrote.
Shit.
This is Bobbins. But it's just so great, hearing from you again, Max. I know you've been doing, mandatory music and CD, which is just another showing of how these shows have evolved. And we've got some questions as well, which we'll delve into, which will cover, I'm sure, many, many bases. But Tony, Mr. A.R. Farina, published author, good sir. What about you? I know it was the Speed Racer, the infamous Speed Racer, and you tried to redeem yourself, I think, with Tank Girl, and that didn't go well. But how did that go with you, the connection with Comics in Motion, and had you had any experience with audio or anything like that?
Well, I did radio in university, as you guys would say. So sort of. I mean, I was like a late night DJ on my small, tiny college campus because no one wanted to be up, and that was fun. And they were like, "Here's a bunch of free shit," and so I could listen to music and take music home, and so I could play whatever I wanted because we were after midnight, and that was good for me. So that was it. I enjoyed that. But no, I was just a fan. So I literally listened to them on Podbean, and I still do listen online a lot. I don't necessarily listen on my phone because I'm online. It's just easy to just open Podbean and just have it there, and then wander around the house, listen that way. So I don't remember what it was, but I think it was something about I just did a search for The Losers, that show. For that
You're not
comic.
the only one.
I know. No, not for the movie, but to see. So there's a couple of other podcasts I found that way where it's like, I'm trying to has anybody covered this weird movie, this thing? I don't know if anybody else has watched this. My wife doesn't care. She doesn't read. She reads 6 comics ever. It's not her oeuvre. She doesn't want to talk to me about The Losers for sure. And she's not going to watch that. So you guys were talking about it though. So it was just one of those things and then once you find the one episode, because in Podbean you can search by just the subject, and then you can find the podcast. So, and that was it. So I just kind of listened, and I wasn't on Twitter or anything at the time. And then when I got on Twitter, I sent them a message and was because they just sounded like people I wanted to hang out with. And so I was just hey, would you guys want to do Speed Racer? And Dave was like, sure. And I was like, oh, cool. Because to me, they were like celebrities, right? These if you had a podcast, it was something. It didn't understand just you could do it. It didn't make sense in my brain at the time. So, and I still feel like Chris and Dave, and and I would echo Max, Mike. You guys are all so much. The Losers has 259,000 views on YouTube, just says Dave. So I didn't find it on YouTube. I heard the show on Podbean. And so then I went back and listened and really enjoyed it. And you guys did do those walkthroughs, and you guys kept me company. And then when Mike showed up on the Dread episode, then I didn't know who Mike was, but then Mike showed up on the Dread episode. And then I went back to episode 1 of your show, of Genuine Chit-Chat, and started to listen to those. So you just guys kind of kept me company while I was doing stuff, walking and working out and whatever. So that was it. So then when they reached out after that, because after they shit all over Speed Racer, I wrote a note, not mad. I wasn't mad. I just wrote a thing that explained why I love Speed Racer so much, and my history, my childhood trauma that was solved, that was, before Speed Racer was the South. And it wasn't like that, but I was just had fond memories of it. And so then they read it. Dave read it to Chris, and Chris was like, I feel kind of bad. But it wasn't supposed to be that. So then they invited me on, and then you invited me on, Mike. So then it was just kind of because I was interacting with you guys. And actually, the weird thing is, though, this is the crazy thing. I wrote for DC Comics News, and Max wrote for Dark Knight News, which are owned by the same guy, but we didn't know each other until we met on Comics in Motion. We didn't know each other, though. We both wrote for Damien.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I assumed you knew each other.
No, we met through you. But we both knew Steve and Matt Lloyd because they wrote for both websites. But we didn't know each other. And so that's how, so it's we knew Steve and Matt before this. but that's how Max and I met, even though we both knew Damien and Josh and all of those, Seth, all those guys who work for both. Oh, he put up the Speed Racer. Thank you for that. So that was it, Mike. So it was just like, I enjoyed it. I listened, and then you guys gave me the chance, and I talked to my wife about it. And like, this would be fun. We just moved to Florida. And you'll be shocked to learn, I don't have a ton of friends. These aren't my people necessarily. And so it was a good opportunity for me to talk to other like-minded nerds. So he was like, yeah, do you? And so that was it. So, because I remember, Dave, you and I talked about it, like what it could be. And you were like, listen, it's yours. You can do whatever you want. And Dave's pitch was, and Max and Mike, I'm sure said that, he's like, if it becomes a big hit and you make millions of dollars and you want to take it, you can. It's yours. You can take all the episodes with you. That was the pitch, as though like I was worried about that at all. But I appreciated that you thought of that, Dave. Like you were like, when you monetize it, you don't have to share. We just want your voice on the network. So that was lovely to hear, because it's like, of course, Indie Comic Spotlight is going to take off. And honestly, listen, when Kelly, like I was barely in like 4 months when Kelly Sue DeConnick said she'd come on. So to me, I had made it. Like meeting you guys has been like a highlight of my life. 100%. Like these people on this screen and then this thing and are my genuine friends. But like you guys said, when you get a thing like, oh, I made it. I interviewed Kelly. Like I sat in a chair and Kelly Sue DeConnick sat in a chair in her house and talked to me for an hour. Like, what the fuck? How did that happen? So to me, I was like, well, of course I'm going to be rich now. She wrote Captain Marvel. She's on my show. Everybody. And that is not even my highest downloaded show is not that one. Not even close. But I thought for sure she's a comic royalty. But so anyway, that was how I got here. But it's just been a treat for me. And so I'm just super pleased that you guys did The Losers, because that is kind of how I stumbled. I mean, I'm sure I would have found it eventually, because Podbean would, they were AI early. They would like, ooh, listen to this. I'd listen to other pop culture shows. So you probably would have gotten into my feed eventually. But
I think we pleaded with them I think, Chris, you sent them a message asking them to promote us. So we went, we had, at the height of downloads, we had something like 4,000 a month or something like that.
Just from them?
That was just from Podbean.
Yeah, we don't know how.
It is amazing, and I will say, I gave Max a lovely compliment. But Tony, from your get-go from your podcasting, as being a guest on the show, because I heard you be a guest on Comics in Motion, then obviously that's why I was like, hey, come on my show, and things. But like, I think that you have both you and Max, so strong starts. Max, Max, you exuding confidence, but Tony, it wasn't that you were nervous in any way, but like you were just you hit the ground running, and it was like, it sounded like to me when you were doing it is like that whatever you spoke about, you'd had a PhD in it. Anything you talk about that you are knowledgeable about, it's like, yeah, Tony's clearly studied this for years, obviously, and now I know it's kind of like the joke.
Someone to let me talk about it. That's all it is. Is
that the joke though of like Season's Greetings and Indie Comic Spotlight, which is like Tony will see beyond anything. It's like, hey, do you think that blue curtain in that one panel means that actually the entire comic's ironic? It's like, no, Tony, I think you've put more thought into that sentence than the writer did the whole story. But it's one of the things, it's one of the beautiful things about the Comics in Motion family. Every person who's been involved either as a guest spot or has their own little show, regardless of how long it ran for, the key thing connecting everyone essentially is we're all loosely nice people, and mainly we're passionate. We're just passionate people who aren't dicks about it, and I think that's a really hard thing to find on nerd fandom in the modern day on the internet, especially as I'm the Star Wars rep, which is a very, very hard fandom to defend. It's very difficult. But like when we did the whole, Dave touched upon it earlier, where the three of us and Scott Weatherly of 20th Century Geek, when we all just spoke about Star Wars and stuff, I was like, oh my God, I get to talk on the internet with people about Star Wars, and it's not telling me that the prequels are shit and that I'm an idiot for still liking Star Wars. It's none of that. It's just we're all criticizing it in this fun way, and we're all just having this good time. And then just quick, like Dave said to me, he's like, do you want to start a Star Wars pod? And I was like, well, I'm already doing genuine chit-chat. That's quite a lot. But I asked, and he was like, well, you can do it on anything. And I was like, well, I am just for the sake of it, because I'm a big nerd, reading every Star Wars comic, I guess I could, talk a little bit about it. And then 3 years later, and I've done like every canon Marvel comic. Obviously, granted, I'm winding down a little bit at the moment, but then me and Dave have got our own podcast of math, which is watching. Basically, I was like, yeah, let's ease up on the Star Wars comics reading. I need to have a little break from that because I'm getting married, all that jazz. Let's replace it with watching 22 episodes a month of Star Wars animated shows that I've seen before. Let's do that. So with Megan now, the only thing is like every time at dinner now, we sit down and it's like, right, episode of the Clone Wars on, just because there's so many episodes if I don't watch one a day. So just any way I can force Star Wars or nerd culture into the crevices. It's sort of Dave and Chris, what you said, that recording on lunch breaks, or let's say recording on lunch breaks in case your employees are listening. I was legitimately recording on lunch breaks. Like every lunch break of mine isn't a break. At work, it's the joke that Mike's doing work. Then he has his lunch break, but in his lunch break, he's just doing work on his laptop. He's just editing stuff. So like, the podcast bug really gets all of us. It's one of those things that when you realise, I think especially, I mean, we all kind of interacted before COVID, which was one of the best things, like sort of about COVID. It was, we all got connected just before it all happened. So we already had these threads, this kind of web of, all of us supporting each other when we were going through a time of isolation. And I found that personally really helped me out, and both Genuine Chit-Chat, but mainly the Comics in Motion Network and everyone involved. It was just so lovely to be able to have these people that you could talk to at any point of the day, and there was no pressure, there was no drama. There's never been any of that in Comics in Motion. It's always just been purely lovely being nerds. So we've got loads of questions here, but is there anything anyone want to add? Mainly the podfathers. Is there anything we want to add before we delve into some of these questions that I'm sure will spin off loads of other conversations? But before we get started, of just the origins of Comics in Motion.
Just a few unstructured thoughts. It seems quite amusing to me now that I thought I'd have to give you the hard sell to do a Star Wars podcast.
I have tattooed on me.
I think I put way too much effort into that.
That crossover, the 3-part crossover, Chris kept, and it was just like, it was there. Chris kept saying, oh yeah, Mike, and it became a running joke. He'd be like, oh right, Mike, you're going to say in the comics, blah, blah, blah. So it was just set. It was just there. But if you go back, I think Chris must have said during that 5-part crossover in there, at least 5 times. Oh, right, I know, Mike, it's in the comics. And you were just kind of joking, but it was like, well, I mean, it was like you were just subliminally putting it in there that it had no choice but to have it.
Say Star Wars comics to Mike 5 times and he'll start a podcast on it. No one say Star Wars anything else to me. I don't have the time.
I would like to say, actually, Mike, one thing with yourself, and it still sticks with me now because I can hear it now, is me and Dave had loads of conversations, and it's just more a logistics thing. But your sound was the sound that I have tried so hard to get when you podcast, because your audio is top notch. From the first time we ever recorded, me and Dave is a proper audiophile, really good at stuff. His mic's good. I've got Blue Yetis. I've had all sorts of shit from bloody eBay, and in the end I had to buy a proper. I'm not saying it sound like you thingy, but your audio has always been exceptional, and that's what helps us get better audio for the podcast. So when we both end up being audio snobs now, if we hear a bad podcast, if I listen to other ones I like and it's bad, I'm like, nope. I always think of your podcast, Mike. So Genuine Chit-Chat, you set the bar, my friend. Definitely.
Thank you. It's funny because this microphone, I looked online at like podcast groups and things of what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and everyone was going, don't you ever get a USB mic. If you get a USB mic, you're a piece of shit. And I was like, whoa there. And my cousin's wife, she has had a microphone. She did a bit of singing online and stuff like that. And then she said, oh, I could borrow it just to test the water, because I'm like, I don't have the money to spend hundreds of pounds on podcasting equipment. I'll borrow one. If it's okay, then I'll kind of go from there. So I just end up buying, I think, the same mic as that, and then like a sister mic. But USB mics are fine. Don't let any of the audiophiles who are dicks about it tell you they're wrong. But yeah, I did the early days of Genuine Chit-Chat. It was hours of editing out background noise and stuff. And now I think I've spoken to Spider Dan about this a bit as well, where it's kind of like in the early days, you're like, I must edit every second, so it's perfect. And then after you've been doing it for a little while, you're like, I don't have time to spend 6 hours editing an hour of audio. Especially editing out ums and things, when if you listen to a podcast and someone says unless it's every other word, which gets irritating, you don't even register it. But it's funny because Megan listened to, obviously me and Megan started dating. I'd already had the podcast on, and she listened, especially during COVID, she got into some celebrity podcasts and things, and she was like, I don't like this. And I was like, why? She's like, because your podcast sounds better than theirs. And it's frustrating that I'm listening to this podcast and this famous person who probably earns more money than you, like more money in a month than you might do in like a decade, paraphrasing loosely the whole conversation. But it's so frustrating that you get someone who clearly has money and I'm like using Audacity because I can't afford any fancy softwares and I just learned to remove background noise. And you've got these high-end celebrities with a producer doing it and all this stuff. And it sounds like they've recorded with a phone in their pocket the whole podcast. And I'm like, what are you doing? You've got all this money. Just buy a better mic. But yeah, well, thank you for those
compliments. If anyone ever listened to the Marvel podcast, but going back to like 2018 or something, they were doing a Marvel podcast. It was fucking terrible. I mean, we started out, I think I had like just iPhone earphones and a speaker, so it doesn't, you can start off on a budget. And I think we got better, as we caught the bug, we got better from that. But even from day one, I think it sounds much better if you listen to it these days. But yeah, the Marvel one was the one that jumped out to me with like, come on, you're Marvel, you should at least take this stuff. But I suspect it was just like an intern and they just like, it was a pet project for them.
Yeah, well, I think podcasts a lot of the time, apart from celebrities during COVID and during the strikes, a lot of people can't make money from podcasting for years. So a lot of the time it was just like, why? It's one of those frustrating things I find in my boring everyday work, which is there's certain elements of companies which don't directly make money for the company. And why would we invest loads of money in them? It's like, if you invest money in this area, which doesn't directly make you income, over time, it will generate it will bleed into other stuff. And I think with podcasting, what a lot of companies and things are doing are like, podcasting doesn't make any money. This is just basically part of marketing. So we'll take a crumb of the marketing budget, we'll flick it over the corner into the podcasting realm, give it to some bloke who once said that they kind of like a podcast or they've listened to Mark Maron or something, and then he can do the whole thing with no budget, no time, and his own job on top of it. And I think that people, all it takes is exporting it as the wrong file or, or not, editing background audio. Like basically with podcasting, if you want to do it right, it takes maybe an hour or two to just play around with whatever software you have or mic. And then once you've got that down, you can kind of do it. But if no one helped you or you've got no way to kind of, play around with things, I think if you just record it, if I just recorded this how it sounds, it wouldn't be as good. So I think that's part of the issue there. But we're now post-COVID, so podcasts are all the big thing now. But speaking of podcasts being the big thing, we've got some questions. I know Tony's got a few hidden away that I haven't seen. I've written one or two as well. So it's going to be a few, but we're all going to be answering these. Not all at the same time, because that's not good podcast form. So I'll try and play administrator or invigilator, trying to point to each people. But we've got a few, some that are just one-off questions, some that are a bit more in-depth. So I'll delve into one from Ria first. So this is a question, and then she's put an extra bit at the end to kind of give more information about the question. So I'll say the question first, you can have a think, and then I'll waffle for a bit. So the question is, what are you currently nerding out to outside of the normal geek stuff? And then she's added in the caveat, I don't think there is such a thing as normal geeky stuff, but something that's not specifically film, TV, or comics. Tell us more about yourselves by something you're nerding out about that might not be covered in a normal Comics in Motion podcast. So others will be here all day. Just one thing that you really like that isn't broadcast out on the podcast sphere, it can be a sentence, it can be a word, it can be an anecdote. Just one little kind of nerdy thing there. So does anyone want to go first? You can put your hands up if you want. I don't know how I don't want everyone just yelling over each other, but Chris, have you got something? Oh, no, Tony.
No, I'll go. I'm going to go.
Do it.
Well, and this is something people know because I have played this a little bit, but I play my uke. That is my favorite nerdy thing, and I haven't done a show about it or anything, and I'm not very good. I've written a couple of songs. I wrote a COVID song as Tricycle Boombox. But I do. So that is something I like to do. I like to just pick that up. I've got a couple up there in the corner, and I just like to sit there. That is a good fun thing, and I just kind of learn a song or two. I'll get online, learn the chords, play that, and then once I learn a song that's got more complicated chords, and I try to just write my own stuff. Sometimes it's just for me. Sometimes I share it. Sometimes it's to accompany the songs that I make up every day while I'm making dinner. So uking out, we'll say.
Amazing. I will say, me and Megan often when we're around the house just sing random little songs to each other. So it's one of those very
and
cute
also
things.
on genuine chit-chat afterthoughts as well.
Oh, yes.
Always starts off with a little tinkle,
There is. Yeah, Megan loves, you can get it, occasionally she's in a musical mood and you can tell because she'll just start the podcast just singing for like a minute or so. And I'm like, this is fine, but in 5 minutes you're going to say that you're tired and you want to stop the podcast, and you've just been singing for the first 2 minutes randomly the Harry Potter theme tune, even though we're talking about like Crank or something. So there's no rhyme or reason. But Chris, is there anything I know obviously you like gaming and stuff like that. Is there anything you want to kind of mention that's not overtly clear on the podmosphere?
Well, gaming, I am just massively, it's actually in front of me, but I am massively down the rabbit hole of my Steam Deck, which I am playing every day. Got this camera, set the background off, but I'm literally sat there at the moment. I'm rebuilding all my retro gaming library because I sold it all to buy the Steam Deck because I sold it for 500. That was 500 and a little bit more, but Sam's name it. Anyway, I'm just rebuilding it all. Yeah, I'm rebuilding it all. However, the one thing that I'm obsessed with at the moment is, and this is nothing to do with anything like gaming or anything, is making my own pizzas. So 500 grams of strong flour, some yeast, 300 grams of warm water, mix it up, a bit of olive oil, salt and pepper. There's your base. Leave it for a couple of hours. I make my own base, my own pizza sauce. I am obsessed with making them every week. And as I call it, Papa Phelps's pizzas are on sale every week. I have a 4-tier rack I bought from Amazon, which goes in my oven. I make a garlic bread. Last week, I made twisted dough balls as well because they had spare dough. Oh, I'm obsessed every week. And Sam and Jordan love them.
What I'm hearing is that Chris is inviting us to a Comics in Motion get-together. Not this summer. Let's go next year, when I'm not, in America. Next year, go to Chris's, all do a big road trip up there, and then he can make us pizzas. We've been making our own pizzas as well, funnily enough, but obviously I'm engaged to an Italian, so that's kind of part and parcel. I can't really get away with that. We've been making on Fridays now instead of ordering takeaway pizza. It's makes a big bit of dough, and then, it's really good. It's a bit healthy for you as well, and a lot cheaper. Yes. Max, do you want to mention anything that's not immediately nerdy that you like doing? It can be nerdy. It's whatever you kind of want, of something you want to tell people about yourselves that you get up to that maybe people don't expect.
I've completely succumbed to the charms or lack thereof of Football Manager on the PlayStation 5.
Oh, nice.
I've literally... every day I have to have my fix, but it's really, but you can't see on the camera, but my beard's gone really grey because of the stress levels involved, and I've been sacked twice recently. I've fallen out with players left, right, and centre. Clubs taking money out my budgets, things like this. It's really sort of upsetting me, and I'm just losing hours of my life to it. I play it in bed after we've gone to bed, after Sarah's gone to sleep, and I'll literally look at the clock and it'll be 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I've got to be up at 6 for work, and it's just affecting my life in every conceivable way. None of them good.
Can I just say, have you seen, Max, the guy on TikTok who does the Football Manager, and his missus walks in and he's got a full sponsorship splashboard at the back, and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah.
And he does his own interviews, doesn't he? I think he's brilliant. That's Have you got any cliches going on, Matt? Proper Football Manager's cliches?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just every press conference, I end up just snapping at the journalists and coming out with negative comments and telling them they know nothing about football, arguing with the board. Honestly, I've never been more exhilarated / depressed in my life by it. But I can't, it's like
brilliant.
It's like crack. I can't get enough of it. It really is just
gets your anger out though. Because you're such a not in an offensive way in any way, shape, or form. You're a mild-mannered individual. You're very, whenever you're on a podcast, like you always manage to keep yourself together. I think Tony gets animated, but he never gets like aggressive about it. And Dave less so as well. But myself and Chris, you wind us up and you let us go. I'm sure that Chris and we've got friends or family members that know exactly the buttons to push, and then we go off on one for ages, and everyone's in the background with their little fishing hooks going, "Hey, we reeled in Michael, we reeled in Chris, we got him, we got under his skin." Whereas with you, Max, I've never seen that side of you. It probably exists somewhere, but maybe in Football Manager, you're just channeling in all this like pent up anger, just like "fuck you, journalists," and then in real life, you're just zen.
honestly, I go to bed seething. I'll wake up still angry about it, and I go to work thinking about it, thinking, well, when I get home, honestly, it's all gonna, I'm gonna whip those boys into shape, so to speak. But
so honestly, I have to say, right, I cannot play those games anymore because I know it consumes your life. You're in work and you're thinking about, should I sign this young player? And, he's not going to get into the team. It was more for me around the mid to late 90s. There was Championship Manager.
Oh, yeah.
I tell you, there was no graphics to it, but, you'd be on the tack and then, against Newcastle or something, and then you'd have the bar and it would go across and you're 90% going to win. And then it'd go to the other end in the 89th minute and it flashes up goal. And honestly, all the GIFs where you see people smashing up PCs and stuff, that's mentally me. I know that it's like crack. I can't touch that stuff.
Well, what can you touch though, Dave? That's no, Chris, calm down.
There's a question.
This is the VHS Strikes Back. We're not getting into that. Okay, we're not getting into that stuff. No Pamela Anderson screensavers here. Dave, what kind of stuff do you like that's maybe not expected, or stuff that's been kind of consuming your time a bit recently? It can be nerdy adjacent if your entire life is consumed by nerddom like mine is.
Not nerdy. I'll try not to bring the mood down, but I was saying to the guys before you joined that, so my current obsession is around this whole post office IT scandal. And this has been going on for best part of 2 decades. But ITV have released a drama about it, 4-part series. Watched the first episode, was absolutely engrossed. And it's one of those, you'll watch it and you'll think, well, surely this is made up. And it's not. And what I find fascinating, I'm very close to IT systems and rolling them out. And what I find fascinating is basically due to software bugs, there's a discrepancy of data, which is a big deal in the finance world, and people have ended up going to prison. People have ended up getting bankrupt. These poor postmaster people. And it's about huge systems of people. So the post office in the UK is owned by the government. And so you end up with, non-techie people getting involved. You're trying to roll out IT systems to a little village post office. This is not a tech-savvy person. And then when they're on the phone to IT and the IT's like, well, it looks all right to me. So, yep, close issue. So it's fascinating just how the whole thing ended up happening. So yeah, that's my current rabbit hole. The other one is Traitors, but that is kind of nerdy / podcast relevant. But yeah, so those are the 2 things.
I know you've got the finger on the pulse, Dave. I think there's a few of us in the Comics in Motion Discord, and there's like people like me. I never post in current affairs because I so don't keep up to date with that sort of jazz. Like when I loosely, very ethereally have an idea of what's going on in the world, but I'm like every time I dip my toes in, I'm like, oh, everything's still on fire. Yep. Oh, politicians lying, people being taken advantage of. Let's dip out again because I like reading Star Wars where people get fucked over by the Empire, and I can pretend it's not happening as opposed to being an allegory for actually what's happening around me. So I try and to some degree loosely know what's going on, but put the blinkers on.
It is a better way, honestly, mental health wise, it is a better way to live your life. I think the difference, because my kids are coming into adulthood now, I think I'm much more sensitive to that, the stuff that we're leaving behind. So yeah, I definitely, at your age, I was definitely not as interested in politics and stuff, and I in some ways I'd like to go back. I'd like to take the blue pill again, or whichever pill it was, where you can just ignore it.
At our age, we all need the blue pill.
Yeah. To be fair, I literally think the other day I was like, would I?
Well, let's not rule out that blue pill, but
well, I was thinking,
speak for yourself.
Would I want to go if I was in the Matrix scenario? It's like Zypher was definitely a dickhead. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, would I want to live in a fucking cave eating gruel, or would I just like to chill out, pretending things? I wouldn't kill my friends over it, but I'm like, The Matrix is a better life. Let's be honest. It's a selfish life, but it is way better. But that could be a whole podcast in itself, which I'm sure will make for an entertaining debate. I'll quickly say my little non-nerdy thing is actually thanks to Tony. Obviously, everyone knows big Star Wars nerd. People can see all the books behind me. I read 25 books in 2023. 23 of them are Star Wars books. 2 of them weren't. One of which Tony reviewed on Pop Gorillas, and the other one is Tony's book. So, reading Tony's book, because the other book was a gift from Megan. It's called How to Be Perfect by Michael Schur. It's like a moral philosophy book.
So good.
It's brilliant. It goes really well.
Banger.
I'm gonna do a Patreon on it, but I've saved the very last chapter because the last chapter is gonna wrap everything up. But I've got a list here of 7 book reviews I need to do before that. But that's a fun book, but it's philosophy, so it's kind of detached from fiction. Whereas I read Tony's book and I was in that mindset because I used to read all the time non-Star Wars stuff. Then I fell out of reading. I read Tony's book and I was like, oh, I forgot how much I enjoyed reading non-Star Wars stuff. I love Star Wars novels, obviously, but it feels like there's a tick list. It feels like there's this amount of Star Wars books, I need to read them all. Whereas when I don't read that, there's no pressure. I don't have to sit there with a notepad and every chapter I finish do a little note of just reminding myself what it is. So thanks to Tony really getting me out of that, because obviously I want to support Tony more than I want to read Star Wars books. It actually made me go, you know what? I'm going to make a specific effort this year, and it's one of the reasons I wound down Comics and Canon a bit, to read less Star Wars content because I want to expand my horizons a little bit. So I've started reading a book called Babel. I purchased Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere recently. Literally this weekend I did because a friend of mine recommended it, and so that's lined up as well. So I'm going to be doing Star Wars reading, non-Star Wars, back and forth. So I have Tony to thank for that, of reading books specifically that aren't Star Wars, so I can kind of get in there. I mean, Neil Gaiman's basically as nerdy as you can get without overtly being comic book stuff, but baby steps. We've got plenty more questions. Here's a couple here's 2 from Rhea, which are really quick fire things. It'll be maybe even 1-word answers for these, but I'll do it both in one. One of the questions was what's the best bath you've ever had? And the other one was, do you think insects have tongues? You're not allowed to Google this. So very odd questions, very quick.
Very
Baths.
questions.
So does anyone actually have like a best bath they've ever had?
Yes.
You do? Okay. Chris,
yes.
Go on. Go ahead. Because I don't have a story.
I have a story.
It's what we like.
Keep it PG.
You don't have to. We sworn a lot. You don't have to do that. It's half the fun. You won't be saying anything. And I went to the bath. Then the story.
Yeah. Well, no, so this is just a more a family one. So I have been the oldest of 9 brothers and sisters and playing football every week. And my Peter Pan-like father, who is also a bellend, and I can say that quite confidently as I get older, we used to go and play football. So we'd all play football. It'd be me, my dad, my 2 brothers, all my friends. And then what we did, we had some netting, set the football nets up, we'd all go and play football. And then what my dad would do is when we were soaking wet, absolutely piss wet through, he'd go, right, lads, I'm going. I put the nets up. See you later. So he would go home, have a bath, fill the bath, and it'd be full of mud. And then he'd be like, no, don't think you're running that bath again because we're in a council house. So then my brother would leg it home before me. He would do it, and Muggins here, being the soft ass, would have to have a bath. So then it became a case of running off the football pitch and leaving our stuff to have a bath. So I had many enjoyable baths, knowing that my dad and my brother were banging on the outside of the bath, and I would have a piss in it and everything, and leave all my mud in there, and then get up and go, enjoy.
I love that you said this is a family story that ends pissing in the bath.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean? And it's good for your skin, apparently. Boy, it wasn't good for mine.
I think it's a different thing that comes out your penis that's good for your skin. I don't think it's urine. Allegedly. I think that's probably a myth. I think that's probably a myth from people who like facials. But does anyone else? I don't have a story about bathing. I've been a showerer for many years, apart from when I had a flu. In the last decade, I've bathed once, and that was because I had the flu. My muscles were aching. I think Max and Tony, do you have any stories about bathing, Dave?
No, I was just, when Chris was telling the story there, I was just imagining this like Victorian setting where you got this big iron bath in the middle of the room or something. Before you get the family bath, every Sunday or whatever. No, I'm more of a showerer as well. I think probably, there might have been one, but I'm trying to keep it PG as well. So, no.
No, I don't have it. I've got a few early ones when I was in my 20s with girlfriends, but no one wants to hear about those, especially not Megan. So it's... Get married this year. Probably shouldn't say stories about my exes and baths on a podcast, should I? So the other one is do you think insects have tongues?
I vote yes.
You vote yes, Max?
I vote yes, definitely.
Yeah, okay. What about Dave and Chris? What do you two think?
I have no idea, but just because the first two answers have been yes, I'm going to be contrarian and say no.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dave and say no. There's no actually rationale, but I thought we'll go for an even split. So,
what's the answer, Mike?
I mean, I didn't look up the answer because Rhea said don't look up the answer before asking it. So I'm going to guess. I'm just doing it now. Do insects have tongues? I don't. I think flies don't because they vomit out on stuff and then they suck up the vomit after the vomit's like melted the thing they're eating, which is why the fly is so horrendous because you watch Jeff Goldblum do it. Well, insects don't have tongues the way humans do. They are able to ingest a solid or a liquid. When they ingest a solid or a liquid, they're able to sense its chemical makeup. This ability to sense chemicals makes up the insect's sense of smell. That's got smell and taste or tongue have got nothing to do with themselves. I think it's basically. For the vast majority of it, they don't because they have taste buds elsewhere. I know, for example, flies have taste buds on their feet. I know that as a fact. So whenever a fly lands on your food, they're also tasting it. Yum, 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 yum. But no, for the vast majority of insects, no. If no insects do it, seems to be the case, apart from maybe one
Max
weird
and I,
one.
Once again, sucking hind tit. Good job, Max. You and me. Bringing up the rear, buddy. It's crushed in pub quiz.
It's a pretty weird question, to be fair. This is more of like a Rhea's question kind of thing.
100%. Yeah.
Which shout out to Femme on Film.
Questions thing.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Femme on Collective because Rhea's question is great.
Song for Rhea's question. That's
you
me.
did on a ukulele as well.
Right.
Perfect. So we've done some of those. So I'll finish off with Rhea's one, which is favourite podcasts that you are listening to. Obviously, all of our answers are going to be VHS Strikes Back, Chris and Dave's Reality Cast, and Comics in Motion Podcast, and Genuine Chit-Chat. But avoiding those obvious ones, quick fire podcasts we're listening to. Tony's Chocolonely, what you listening to?
Cover to credits.
What's that?
It's a woman called Adina, and she's a librarian from Pittsburgh, and her husband Ian, he's a graphic artist, and they do books and their movie adaptations. It's something I've been listening to for years. I'm a big fan of those guys. And again, I'm just not picking people from the family. You could easily, say Spider-Dan and 20th Century Geek, and but
I was going to say I was going to list all those guys at the end.
Yeah, cover to credits. It's really fun.
Yeah, so Femme on Collective, amazing. 20th Century Geek, amazing. Spider-Man, The Secret Wars, amazing. Yeah. All those things back to the filmography, also amazing. But sorry, one more time, Tony, because I'm going to put all these in the show notes.
Cover to credits, it's called.
Cover to credits, no worries. Max, are there any podcasts that you're listening to?
Yeah, the Canon, which I think Tony listens to as well. Yeah.
I love the Canon.
Which is great, where it's these two American guys who basically watch every film ever made by Canon Films.
Oh.
And critique them in a highly comedic way.
I made them watch Tank Girl, Max.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, they did a Tank Girl episode, and I'm actually on that episode doing the intro of why I made them watch Tank Girl. Look at that, makes it all come together. Yeah.
There's 6 degrees of Tony and Max on this podcast. Are we just going to find out that randomly you lived right near each other at one point where Tony actually had a semester in the UK and he actually shared
I wish. If only. No, the Canon, what a show, Max.
Canon, fantastic.
It is absolutely brilliant, and they do like Canon adjacent films as well. Like could have been a Canon, so they'll cover like
that was it. Tank Girl could have been a Canon.
Yeah. So they'll cover some terrible films like Tank Girl.
Tank Girl's not a good one. Sorry, Tony. No, it's not a good film. I'm really sorry, Tony. I tried watching that.
Fine.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah, mainly that, and another one called Under the Cosh, which is really good. Which is like it's a football podcast, but they interview footballers who are like not like elite level footballers who played at a slightly less than elite level, so they're not afraid to tell like quite lewd stories about their career and things like that. It's not very sort of PR driven and PC. It's quite a good show to listen to if you like a good laugh about the sport. So yeah, probably mainly those two, aside from, as everyone said, the ones that sort of operate under the Comics in Motion Venn diagram, yeah.
The Comics in Motion extended family, as it were. Chris, do you listen to podcasts at all? I know you're always making them, but do you actually listen to many?
I do, actually. I have. I'm just looking as we're talking. I have about 5 or 6 I listen to every week. Wow. I'm not in the Comics in Motion family.
Well, pick 2. You could pick 2 to loose. You can name them all, but if you just pick 2 to loosely talk about, we'll be here all day.
Okay, so the main two that I listen to are and this will be no surprise, as my football team is absolute wank, is the Talk of the Devils United podcast. And it's actually better listening to when we're crap, because the podcast gets more animated. It's all reporters. It's quite good. And they have all inside stuff on United. And it just depresses me.
Can you send me a link to that, Chris? That'd be a good laugh.
Suck my balls.
They'll be in the description.
Yeah, fuck you. Anyway, and then the one that I've listened to for years is The Fighter and the Kid, which I've listened to for years.
Did you appear on one of those, or was there something?
So one of the hosts, Brian Caliendo, of the podcast, I did that years ago, like one of his. But it's a ex-UFC fighter, Brendan Sharp and Brian Callen, and loads of controversy, but they still go. So they're my main two, and then I listen to like IGN Podcast Unlocked, IGN Beyond PlayStation 1, Xbox Podcast, and then one of the main ones is Kind of Funny Games as well, which they do all of the gaming stuff across like every console, these episodes every week. And then on a Saturday, Mike, the last one is I Have to Keep It Vegas. Is Vegas Revealed? And I've been on that and appeared on that a couple of times on that podcast as well. Two reporters who live and breathe Vegas, and I go on and I've been on twice, but the different people go on and contribute, and they have all the news about Las Vegas. So we'll listen to that every single week. Love it.
Well, funnily enough, before I get on to Dave, I'm just thinking, I've been trying to collect some podcasts for this year, and I want to have more familiar faces on. I'm going to have you on the podcast in the next couple of months, just to talk about Vegas, so we could also get some recommendations and stuff. I'm going to ask Tonya as well, because obviously she lives in Vegas, get some recommendations and stuff for when Megan and I go down to Vegas and get married in August. So I'm saying that on a podcast, so I'm held accountable, because if I say it any other time...
And I am as well.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I go on everyone's podcast all the time, so I'll drag you in. But Dave, a couple of podcasts, I've written down all of Chris's, so you could name 10 if you want, but speak about 2 ideally.
I'll say 2, because I do listen to a lot of things like Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls, the comics in motion family kind
I'll
of
list
thing.
all them in the
20th Century Geek, Stories Out of Time and Space. But 2 that are completely unrelated. So one is Behind the Bastards. I do enjoy that. So it'll take someone from history. So they've just gone through Kaiser Wilhelm, to talk about him. Henry Kissinger obviously passed away recently, so he gets a good roasting. So it's well researched, quite amusing as well. So do recommend that one. And the other one is The Troll, which is more of a current affairs kind of political commentary. Again, quite amusing by a couple of women, so Marina Perkis and Gemma Forte. So I do enjoy that one as well.
Amazing. Well, with me, it sounds like a cop-out, but legitimately, as people saw from my Spotify Wrapped, I basically don't really listen to anything outside of that. I know he's not in the best terms at the moment, but he got me into podcasting. I listen to the very odd Rogan podcast. The only reason he's ever in my Wrapped is because his episodes are 3 to 4 hours long. So I only need to listen to like one every month, and it basically equals out to everyone else's podcast output. And back to Filmography, Spider-Dan and Back to Filmography are the main ones I listen to every single episode, regardless. And then I've been listening to something called the Tony and Ryan podcast, which is one that Megan got into. It's one of the biggest podcasts in America. It's just 2 people, Tony and Ryan, they're friends. Every episode's like half an hour long. It's just really chilled out, silly, funny stuff. And because they're Australian, I don't know if it's just British people who find this, or maybe it's just me and Megan, but I find that anything said in an Australian accent is just funnier. Not in an insult to them, they just seem more funny. And I don't know what it is. Just a joke in an English accent and a joke in an Australian accent, for me, will hit more. So whenever they're being silly and saying funny stuff, it hits another way. So if anyone wants another podcast, as well as all these other ones we've mentioned, Tony and Ryan, it's a pretty easygoing podcast. So we got some more. Speaking of Chris's anecdotes, which we touched on slightly earlier, Spider-Dan's only question is, which of Chris's anecdotes is your favourite? And I put anecdotes in quote marks because I think he was indicating that there was some not so PG stories that Chris occasionally tells, mainly on the VHS Strikes Back. So does anyone have any favourite anecdotes of Chris's? Mine, I'm going to cop out and say the Pamela Anderson one, because
the Danger Wink, 100%.
Yeah,
that's the
that's
answer.
pretty
same.
Pretty hard to beat, wanking at work to Pamela Anderson, screensaver. You can't really beat that, can you? I don't know, Dave, Max, do you two have any preferred ones?
The press
there have been so
ups,
many.
The press ups one when his mum walked in and he pretended to be doing press ups when he's really been knocking one
is
out.
Great,
Perfect.
Max.
How could you do press ups with? I'm not going to ask that question.
So I remember it vividly, right? Because this was a weird thing. So we decided we were going to review American Pie, and because we're into a groove now, a cadence with the VHS, we know that, right, okay, this is going to be the movie. We don't necessarily watch the trailer for next week, so depending on who sent it in, I might keep it from Chris, and so we sort of watch the trailer live, and then it's like, right, okay, so let's go away, we'll watch it, and then we'll come back together and discuss it. We don't plan out what route is the conversation going to take, and we just ended up on this weird rabbit hole of wanking stories. And I just remember Chris talking about, having some happy time. And, but
you call it happy time is one of the worst things I've ever heard in my life.
His mum, he said he just heard the last step on the stairs creak. So dived onto the floor and started doing press-ups.
Were your trousers still round your ankles at this point?
No.
With a bare ass?
No.
Like, you're a bit sweaty. And I just remember just being crying, but not only like in the moment, but going back editing, just literally crying, listening back to it. And then also, it's one of the episodes I do occasionally go back to. And it's just, it really caught me off guard, that one. So that definitely. And the Pamela Anderson one, to be fair, it was one of those where the story kept unfolding, I'm like, is he really going to say this? yeah, he's going to go there. Fair play.
I think one of the funniest things I think about it, and I'm not going to put anyone in it here, apart from myself, clearly, but Megan won't listen to this, so I'm all right. I think it's one of those weird things where the majority, let's say majority to not put the blanket over everyone, the majority of men, when their significant other is out of the house for a period of time that is going to be a substantial-ish amount of time.
Key in the door.
You're like, you wait 5-10 minutes to make sure they haven't forgotten anything and come back, and then you're like, you know what? I wasn't going to, but I've got a bit of time. I need some me time. And then you do it, and then you feel like shit afterwards. That's my experience anyway. And I just instant regret. Finish, just, what am I doing myself? What have I done? And then you have to spend time cleaning, and you're like, this is grim. Why did I do that? And then the next day, they go away again. You're like, time for some me time. Oh, God, what have I done to myself?
Barry White music comes on, isn't it? As soon as the door goes, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun,
yeah, I think a lot of people really appreciate your stories, Chris, because I think we all have stories, but none of us are, let's say, brave enough. Let's call it brave. To speak them out on the podcast. On a pub. I don't even utter them to some of my closest friends or Megan, let alone on a podcast. So hats off to you, good sir.
You notice how these, you guys don't listen to the reality one. So Chris's other half listens to the reality, so they don't get discussed over there.
The danger zone.
But
They're reserved for the VHS.
Yeah, but we did cross-pollinate, and then, some have, and some have listened to the American Pie one. And just thought, why did you say that story?
It's like, I've never said any other stories like that in any of the podcasts. Don't worry about it.
Never. No, well, the thing is,
a one-off thing. I don't even know what you're talking about. I was possessed. I was drunk.
It was a one time at band camp. I'm sorry, but the thing is, as well, we've done it, and we've talked about people who we know, and it doesn't really affect Dave because he's miles away. But we talk to people who, and then one of my relatives was like, I tried to listen to the podcast, but I just couldn't get into it. I'm thinking, fuck, you didn't, because you mentioned you about 5 episodes in. We did not by name, but sort of like, they're going to know that we're talking about it. And I'm like, please don't listen to anymore. Please don't listen.
You have to.
You're on the BBC now, so you're becoming a bit more of a minor
it's locally
celebrity.
Famous. Berkshire, isn't it? Or is it? No, it's gone up beyond that now, isn't it? It started there.
Well, we started at Berkshire, then it was 3 counties. And now I'm at Radio Berkshire's binge watch specialist every 2 weeks, and then I do Radio Leicester, Radio Birmingham. But I am actually doing a national radio show now twice a month. But that is, to be fair, is just a farce. Not a farce, but it's just like, how have I ended up here? Because the other week, the guy created EastEnders, and he'd written Casualty, He'd got BAFTAs, and he was award-winning, TV producer, brought all these things. This lady was on, who was an amazing writer, and they give her these massive build-ups. And then we went, we've got Chris Phelps, who does podcasting. And it's just like, why am I here?
You comported yourself very well. That was a great show.
Oh, it's the biggest blag ever, Tony, honestly. But I love it. And the platform of podcasting has helped us get there, because it's through that reality TV that we've ended up being on BBC. I don't know how, but it's just a great experience. And you guys are part of that, because all of us all coming together and having the confidence to do it. It's just, it's so crazy. And Dave pisses himself laughing, because the other week he was listening to it and he's like, "You were fucking blagging it there." When you went, "Yep, 100%.
The thing is, we know each other so well now. And I know, and probably the only person, it's Sam, I guess, the only other person I was going to say on the planet who knows this is 100% black, because you would think with the BBC you get scripted, this is what we're going to ask you. And there was some question, something about, I'm a celebrity viewing figures. And the presenter was like, "Chris, do you know what the viewing figures have dropped down to?" And I can't remember what his response was. "Oh, yeah, I think it was about 10 million or something." I was just laughing my head off. And I keep reminding Chris about, if you've ever seen it, there's a guy who was interviewing for a job on the BBC and somehow got mistook for a subject matter expert. So it ends up being actually sat in the interviewee chair and interviewed. And you could see when the first question comes, he sort of looks at the camera, is like, and they're just asking his opinion about stuff, and he's like, "Oh yeah, it seems all right."
I feel like Chris.
Such a brilliant thing.
If I didn't know better, because I know Chris is not, would never be a heroin junkie, but don't you guys all feel like Chris's screen and like the character from literature and film who is Chris is Spud from Trainspotting?
I mean, that's a good one. That's
my pleasure.
And that's my favorite film of all time as well.
And other people's pleasure. That whole speech, that whole interview, Chris, I feel I love that film. I love the book. And then I met you and the stories you tell and the way that, because I'm with, I didn't know. I'm listening along. I'm watching whatever. I'm listening to you. I'm like, I believe it. And then only later you're like, that was all.
Yeah, it's a bullshit. They did the other week to me, Tony. They said to me, we're going to go and talk about I'm a Celebrity and something else. And then the woman just threw a question out about fucking the British Bake Off. I've never fucking watched it. They never told me they were doing it.
Should have called me. I'm an expert now because I'm Megan.
Well, Mike, I'm there.
If they get a drag race segment, let me know, because I remembered all the names of the drag queens.
Well, I've got a mechanical keypad here. Like, the gaming keypad is mechanical. So I'm trying to type, thinking, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And I just completely blagged it and went off the subject. And I'm thinking, I bet she's thinking he hasn't got a clue what I'm talking about. I do have a clue. They've caught me off guard a few times, and I'm just like, I am proper winging it and blagging it. It's like going around the houses talking about something else. Luckily, not press-up stories and things like that. But
I think my favourite is because we ended up, they reached out to us, but you kind of build as the binge watch expert and how you love and devour all reality TV. And so they'll give you 24 hours notice. "Oh, right, we're going to talk about Housewives of Cheshire or something." So Chris is there watching on his phone, trying to catch up on double speed or something. So he's got an opinion on it. It just amuses me no end. I love it. And he says, "Oh, I've got to watch fucking this other series now."
I mean, that's incredible.
But I have to suggest to them now. So I have to go on streaming platforms and find a show. Fucking suggest it. I was that desperate. We had to suggest Sam's been watching Paris Hilton's fucking reality show, because I've watched a little bit of it. I was like, "Oh, I love it. Oh, it's fantastic." And I'm on fucking Wikipedia reading reviews about a family and the dynamics. I've watched about 20 minutes of it. I hope they're not listening. But yeah, it's just fake it till you make it. And I love the fact they keep saying that. Saying when we're on the late night one that I do, and that's it's like a national one. That's not a boasting, it's just national. They go, "Chris Phelps, from Chris and Dave's reality TV guest, one of the most successful podcasts out there." I'm thinking, yeah, Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
One of the
we'll
most successful podcasts if you're not already a celebrity, which would probably be accurate, because if you're not already famous, getting big in podcasting, unless you're already like a TikTok star, pretty damn difficult, because I've been trying. But we've got some more questions, and I know that we have got a time limit, so as much as I love these Chris anecdotes, there's a question from Math, which is how many films has Chris put his shoulder out to? I think we'll put that's a guesswork. We can think of a number of that at the end, but that kind of links in with what we've said before. Some of these questions kind of amalgamate together, so I will ask a couple and give people further props, but I think there's one more which is slightly more kind of silly-ish, and it's from Jack. Back to the filmography and obviously season's greetings and things. And he said, if you were to swap hosting duties, what would be your dream comic, movie, or TV show to cover? So if we swapped hosting duties with anyone in the Comics in Motion extended family, let's put it out all the way to Spider-Dan, Femme Collective, everything. I know we're all welcome on all those shows anyway, but if there's any topic or anything that you'd want to talk about on a podcast that you haven't, what would that kind of be? Would anyone like to go first?
I would.
Go on then, Chris. Hit it out of the park while the rest of us try to think. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's because you mentioned it before, Mike, and I love your knowledge, because we always say you're the encyclopedia. The knowledge is amazing. But I am going to go back to what Tony said. When there is holes in these films, and I love the films, I love all of it. I love the fact that there's a comic book run. And when you first started telling me that, I thought, is Mike having me at it here or not? And it was actually true. You know, like fucking Boba Fett, the biggest fucking blaggest myth ever. And he gets killed with a fucking, this big fucking pair of teeth in the fucking desert. He's in the Jedi, but it's this mythical character. But I know he's not. I know in the comics and everything else, it's huge. But in the films, he's a fucking fluffer for Darth Vader. He's just some fucking bounty hunter who gets binned off and he's shit. But he's like 35 years of just being the best. So I would go on there and just fucking tear that whole universe a fucking new one completely. I would completely. As much as I love it, I'd be on it, mate.
You'd call it Star Wars, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And if you had some anecdotes, it would probably be Star Wars, wouldn't it? But I think it's a different one.
Did they ever tell you about when
that movie exists?
Yeah, Paul went off to Princess Leia.
I think it's some Zack and Miri make a porno. Actually, I think there is. I think Star Wars is as a whole segment in that when they first try to make the porno and all the stuff gets nicked. That's not a great movie, but you do get to see Jason Mewes' massive dong, so I suppose there's some benefits to that. Anyone else with the hosting duty swap? Go on, Dave.
So I'm going to say Star Wars as well, Star Wars comics in canon, just because I absolutely love the universe. You and I have discussed many times. It is my first love. If I think of anything pop culture, I love Star Wars the most. But I don't have the staying power to actually be asked to remember who this particular creature is, what their name is, what species they are, and they're loosely related to this species. So I find it fascinating to listen to, and just the fact that, you do note down, and I'm sure doing the podcast forces you to do more research and stuff, but as soon as you've mentioned a species name, if it's outside of the main cast, probably I've already forgotten it. So, to be able to absorb and retain that Star Wars knowledge, to be able to present Star Wars comics in canon, that would probably be the one that stands out for me.
No, it's very kind. Both of you, thank you very much for conflating my ego unnecessarily. It doesn't need to get any more. I'm all good. If the other two of you say Star Wars comics in canon, I don't know what I'm going to do. My head's going to expand out of frame. But Max, Tony, Tony, you want to go first, and then we'll finish off for Max?
Well, this is something Max and I had threatened to do about a year ago. And so I would say I would host it and then make Max come on to be the guest on his own show, Mandatory Marvel and DC, the X-Men Marauder series. Listen, Dave's obviously in.
Yeah.
It was a run. It was like the late 190s to the early 200s of the series Uncanny X-Men, X-Men 201, who will lead them as part of the Marauder series, Storm versus Cyclops. Cyclops sucks. I love the Marauder series. It was one of my all-time favorite runs. That was like kind of a weird one. And I know we talked about it, and it was even hard to find, even though if it was on Marvel Unlimited, and it was maybe not even part of those things, those collected works that you get, Max, right? So that's the one, if I can make that happen, make a Marauders collected edition happen so Max and I can cover it. That's the one.
Wow, amazing.
I don't think Storm has been better. She's become this diluted character, but That run was amazing.
Yeah.
Max,
My favorite X-Men run of all time.
what would you do?
I'd like to do what Matt B. Lloyd does with his Classics Comics show. I love listening to Matt, the way he sort of rather than talk around the story and sort of talk about it and discuss it, he actually goes through the story that's in the comic book and sort of reads you out passages and what have you. I'd love to do something like that. I think it'd just be a lot of fun. I could listen to Matt do it. I could listen to Matt read the phone book. I really could. His voice is I find his voice very soothing, and I enjoy listening to him a lot. But yeah, I think I'd love to do something like that, just to sort of, one of those like fireside story style. I don't know how I'd make it good with doing it with the book where it's very visual, so I don't know how I'd represent it, whereas I'd have to describe the imagery as well as the dialogue as well. But it'd be quite a good challenge, and doing something like that, maybe with like the odd sound effect and things like this, or like try and do different voices as well of the characters rather than just do it in my own boring voice, which I hate the sound of. Just like put on an accent or something like that, something ridiculous.
Careful with that.
Well, yeah. Oh, no, we wouldn't be getting into cultural appropriation.
No, Max has got. I've heard Max do accents. You did very well. You studied theater a bit. You do an excellent South African accent. I've heard you do it.
I'm not going to do it now,
No.
but yeah, something like that, and just try and create something like that maybe one day. Yeah, I think that'd be quite interesting to do, and you could have like other people on to do the odd voice here and there, just to mix it up, so you
Like
don't have
an
to
audio comic.
Yeah, kind of something like that. So you're not having to pretend to be, try and like take on a woman's voice unrealistically. You could actually have female people on doing that and what have you, and children and things like that. If there's any kids in it, all that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that would be quite a interesting thing to do. But it sounds like a lot of work though, so maybe not.
I mean, from Matt and I, the foundation of Matt and I's and Matt and my shows are quite similar in certain respects, and I can tell you for fact it is. For example, just to clarify, like a Star Wars comic, that a comic takes if it's a Chris Claremont comic, it would take you 20 minutes to read, but most comics, 20 odd pages, 5 or so minutes, maybe 10. Writing the notes for me per comic on average takes about half an hour per issue. So if it's normally, most stories are between, realistically probably 6 to 8. So you got to think probably about 3-ish hours of writing, like converting things into note form of what you're seeing visually on the page while also trying to make it make sense. So adding in audio drama and all that kind of stuff in. That's the kind of reason why we in Comics in Motion are putting it out there officially. If there's any billionaires that want to back us up, we'll get Max's show off the road. We'll all swap hosting duties. We'll all get to just do whatever the hell we want all the time. Come on, we've all got some good ideas. My one personally, one of the reasons I love Spider-Man, The Secret Wars, and Back to Filmography, I know they extended Comics in Motion family, but Back to Filmography, we can kind of count that because it kind of, the pilot was almost the pilot was basically on the Comics in Motion feed, so I'm going to use that. I'm a lot like Jack in the way that I love completion. Like, Megan gets annoyed about it because if a new film comes out, I'm like, great, chance to watch every single film that came before it. And she's like, but this is like the 9th film. And I'm like, yeah, get ready for the next 8. And it's like, and she's like, I don't want to do that. And then, as patrons will know, horror season comes around. All she wants to do is watch horror franchises. Let's watch all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. She was talking about watching all the Friday the 13th films. I was like, Megan, there's 12 of them, and none of them are good. And then there's Freddy vs. Jason and a remake that apparently suck as well. So I'm like,
oh my God, the remake is a big sweaty ball sack.
Yeah,
it's
that's
awful.
Probably what we're going to do next year. So at least parts of it, I'm going to do the abridged version. But for me, I would either do Back to Filmography because I love completing stuff. That's why I started the Star Wars podcast, because I was like, I'm going to get in the Star Wars canon and read it all. I can't, it's impossible. But I really like that format. Or Spider-Dance, because I love really obscure, weird films. I know, obviously, I'm the herald for the biggest franchise in existence and the most mainstream nerdy thing that exists aside from the MCU. But beside me are hundreds of Blu-rays and DVDs, and a lot of them are like random ass films, like my brothers showed me and things. Like, that's why occasionally Spider-Man will go, oh yeah, have you guys seen this film, like Rubber, that you guys tackled on the Patreon VHS? And I'm like, I have that on DVD. Like, I know I don't seem like the certain big films people talk about I've not seen, but there's lots of really random weird films that I've seen. So I love obscure movies. I think that's one of my favorite things, because I love movies more than series, because you can just go, I'm going to sit down for 2-ish hours and the story's done. Whereas a series, it's like you have to commit 18 episodes an hour ago for, 7 seasons. That's like 5 days of your life to watch a series. And the middle series is normally crap anyway. So that would be my ones there. So I've got a few more.
So many though, aren't there? I mean, if you think about what I love, it just honestly, it's sort of reigniting some creative juices again. I think Max, you should absolutely do that. We'll call it Maxonori. I think that putting the sound effects on and stuff would be quite a bit of extra work. I mean, Chris and I tried to do a little bit of an audio drama. Do you remember that? We did it for One Movie Punch, I think it was, and we probably had about an hour's worth of takes for roughly 2 minutes of footage. But yeah, things like, superheroes for dummies, what's the topic, there's been so many. And like I say, what I love about it is, and part of the extended family as well, is just how everyone brings something a bit different, a different voice, different opinions, but creatively, how are you going to construct that show, that episode that someone's going to take time out of their day to listen to? So it's just brilliant. I love it.
And shout out to Stories Out of Time and Space as well, because I forgot to mention them, because obviously they're obviously been doing a lot of projects. They did the Red Dwarf and Black Mirror, and they've got some other stuff going on in the background as well, which will be coming out. So I love completionist stuff. That's my jam. So I'm going to bunch together a few other questions, but I've got a couple of kind of quick fire ones I'll save to the end. One of Jack only submitted 2 questions. There was that one, which I knew would be quite a good one. The other one he submitted, and no shade to you, Jack, I love you, but he said, finish this sentence starter: peanut butter and blank. I mean, does anyone...
Jelly is the only answer.
Obviously you'd say jelly, we'd say jam, even though I don't think people really have peanut butter and jam over here.
I would say chocolate.
Chocolate's a good one.
I would have said chocolate, yeah. Reese's, yeah.
I mean, I would say the Marmite peanut butter is actually really nice.
What is wrong with you people?
Oi, hey, you get guns in Walmart. We have Marmite, okay?
To be fair, the chocolate in America, Tony, tastes like sick. So
yeah, it's horrendous.
Let's not go
yeah,
there.
the chocolate, you guys have sucked.
So, I'm sorry, I would say peanut butter can suck my balls because I fucking hate it. If I smell it, it makes me... I fucking hate it.
Spider-Man hates it more than you because he'll die if he eats it.
Well,
I'm not that bad, but I've
been a vegetarian for 30-something years, and so peanut butter is my main source of protein. So I would die without it.
We often on the weekend make peanut butter and banana smoothies with a bit of protein powder, and it's just like it's like a nice milkshake. It feels like it's something bad for you, but it's actually okay. But that was a fun one, because we all know that Chris is going to be the official sponsor of peanut butter in the UK. We're going to get that sorted. But for some more actual other questions, so I'm going to amalgamate some of these together. So Math and Tonya. So Math said, where do you see Comics in Motion going? Any plans for what else to expect? Obviously, Star Wars Comics and Canon came from this. Is there something else you think is missing that could get a look into? As well as, did you ever think it would grow and get to 1,000 episodes? As well as, what would you like to see in the future of Comics in Motion? And also, Tonya said, what's your biggest challenge and what's your greatest unexpected blessing? So all of these are quite similar in certain respects. So first of all, I'll ask Chris and Dave, what did you think this was going to go in this way, and how's the journey been so far? And then after that, I think we'll each just give our biggest sort of proud moment and maybe challenge, and that will kind of cover most bases. So Chris and Dave, did you expect it to get this big? And what are your kind of overview of where we're at now? Because we spoke about the start, but how it's been the last couple years, especially around COVID. What have you kind of thought about Comics in Motion being bigger?
Dave, do you want to go? You go.
Sorry, yeah. I was just thinking, so the unexpected part of it is just the community that we've created together. And not to sound like a communist or anything, but I do feel like it was, in my mind, it was always like this socialist experiment. So yeah, Chris and I just happened to be the ones at the start, but as people come in with new ideas, or maybe I should say Arthur's Round Table or something like that, rather than Stalin. So, just starting off with that nucleus of great people, and then bringing in other people. and the amount of people that we have in our, not just who do shows on Comics in Motion, but that wider family network as well. I never thought, we'd do anything like that. I guess in my mind, I was just thinking more about, having a one-stop shop where you could go to a podcast feed and you could get lots of different shows. You could get your indie comics fix. If you're more of a Marvel and DC guy, you've got that. You can go there for your Star Wars. You can go there for your up-to-date news. What are all the latest trailers coming out? What's the gossip? And things like that. So that was where my head was at. But the absolute best thing to come out of it is the community for me. Just where we've been, and I agree with what you were saying about the pandemic. By the way, I think we'd have all got, well, probably through it anyway, but it was such a almost relief to have this outlet, this safe space as well, and you mentioned about Star Wars. It's funny, actually, when you kick that off, I think probably Star Wars was the most toxic fandom going at the time, so it must have been quite a relief for you as well. So yeah, that is the best thing, I would say, for me. And in terms of what's coming up, so I guess we will try and stick to the once a month, but we have to figure out what that is. And, I guess part of the other thing that's happened is with us, it's just when we started off, there were a few films. Marvel hadn't got to the crest. We hadn't done the whole Avengers Endgame and stuff like that. And where every other blockbuster was a comic book movie. We hadn't got to that, but you end up just completely swamped because there's so many movies, there's so many shows, you can't possibly keep up with everything. So once you fall out of the race, that's probably ended up us being where we are. But we're definitely trying and do more. And from my perspective, I still want, that collective creative input from everyone. But, having this melting pot of ideas, and someone comes up with an idea, like, yeah, great, let's go with it, and okay, we can brainstorm some ideas, but you know what? Just start it, just do it, and if you get it where you're like 60% there, where you're 60% happy, great, put it together, and then the next time you'll be 65% happy, or 70%, and you'll just evolve like that. So I always want it to be that kind of melting pot for creativity.
And I want to just add in there, my kind of goal personally with where I'm winding Comics and Canon back a little bit was because I want to get more invested in some of the wider shows. I want to read more indie comics. I want to, I know the Comics in Motion book club. I know Steve and I think Rhea really want to continue a Sandman, and I just haven't read any more Sandman. And I'm like, because I'm reading so many Star Wars comics. So I want from myself going forward, I'm winding down Star Wars a little bit, but that's because I want to read non-Star Wars stuff and do more collaborations and not have it so that 3 or 4 days a week are purely podcasts that I feel like I have to do every single week. If I can loosen up a bit at that time, it gives more freedom, because these roundtable conversations and hearing different perspectives, things like, Tonya's banned books weeks, those things are so incredible. And having some of the roundtable discussions we've had on Comics in Motion, I remember the big one was the Justice League, the Snyder Cut. That was like a huge podcast. I think it was like 6 of us in that. That was a massive, I think it was like 3 hours long or something nuts. There was so much fun. There was so much to it, so many perspectives.
And they're the kind of things I want. So long that Chris had to go to sleep, and so did Max. I think you started with 6 and it ended with 2. Like that
exactly.
show just
There's a war
kept
of attrition.
100%. Exactly. And I want more of those kind of things.
Yeah.
I want more of us to be able to go, hey guys, I want to talk about this comic book movie or that. And we all go, cool, us 5 are involved. We don't have to put on a show. We don't have to have a deadline. We can just figure it out and just record when. So that's from me. Sorry, Chris. It was meant to be your question, but
No, it's fine. Don't be daft. No, don't be daft. I think for me, as Dave said, and everyone should remember this, a good idea is a good idea forever. So just bear that in mind, everyone. However, I need to commit to do more shows. Yeah, more shows, because we just fell off a cliff. The once a month thing. Dave still said he's going to do the Flash at some point, but I've never had the call back. So
I get an monkey.
Not your turn. You've talked enough. If you don't mind.
Sorry.
You might. Yeah. So I do need to commit to it, and I do think, like, 2 years ago, and he's going to fucking hate this because every time I give him a compliment, he hates it. Turning my camera off, Dave. But Dave started the whole expanding of the comics in motion. It was his idea. He's very good at creating things and following through with them, whereas I am a walking, let's do it, enthusiastic fucking Labrador. But then when it actually comes to the commitment side of it, I'm committed if I'm into it, but then I'm not. It's obviously the ADHD, which I now understand why. That's what I do. I start projects and don't finish it and stuff like that unless I'm really into it. However, Dave created everything about comics in motion, as in the wider community. The podcast was me and him, which said, I still miss the fact that we don't do it. We do the other podcasts all the time. We have a DNA of a podcast which you could listen across any of our podcasts, and it's the same cadence, the same start, the way we do things is it's the same, and that's all from comics in motion. So I do want to commit to more. I know I get up early every day, but I've had such good fun tonight. It's like me and Dave need to do stuff. I need to do stuff again and appear on other people's podcasts. But no, I'm really happy where everything is. It's great. We've got so many great friends as well, like people all around the world. It's amazing. And I just struggle on the Discord because sometimes I'm like, Dave, I don't know who this person is. Yeah, they've joined, they've got a show. I'm like, oh, fucking great. Yeah, it's supposed to be like one of the originators of the comics in motion. I don't know who they are. And I feel really bad then, like them being dead ignorant or like really, like I don't care when I do. And I can't keep up with all the conversations. I try my hardest. The Discord thing is brilliant. It's just an absolute mind of its own, and everyone's really respectful. It's very rare we've had any sort of disagreements, and it's sorted out. Then it's very rare for such an open forum of people, different opinions as well. So no, he's policed very well. So Dave deserves a lot of credit for it, but his mind's mute and he's still a bellend. So anyway, next person.
I will say, Chris, just before I go to Tony and Max, and I know we're getting near the end of time, what I was thinking, an idea, and again, saying on the pod specifically to try and nail it in, is I know that Math, as well as Dan, not Spider Dan, as in Dan Belgrave, as well as myself, video game related comic book stuff. I think that's the only area where we haven't in Comics in Motion tackled. I don't think we need to do a regular show about it, but Spider-Man the original, and then Miles Morales, and also Spider-Man 2, some of the old school games as well, like Uncaged Wolverine. There's the Wolverine game coming out, lots of things. I think maybe something to, and I'm happy to try and play host for that and try and orchestrate things together, because I want to try and get more into video games. I think that might be a good way in, because I think the only podcasting output you don't do at the moment is video game talk. So I think if we can get you in that, we could really get the gears turning.
Oh my God, Dan would be great for that. He loves it.
I will say, the only thing with Dan is like, when he started doing some Pop Gorilla stuff, I was like, I want more from Dan. I know,
he's such a dream.
Exactly.
He's so fun. Yeah,
100%. So I'll go to Max first. Sorry, I'm pointing the wrong way. Max, some of the just unexpected stuff from Comics in Motion, from doing podcasting in itself, and maybe some of the highs that you've had from that as well.
The whole thing has been great. It's something I never really envisaged doing at all until I was asked by these two gents if I wanted to do it. I still massively suffer from imposter syndrome when the whole thing. That's why my output tends to dwindle as time goes on. It's not through lack of interest or lack of need or desire. It's just I just tend to think, what have I actually got to say? What am I not just repeating myself the more I go on and do this? Is every episode the same, just about something else? So I don't know. I think I just need to rid myself of that feeling, I guess, and up my output, because you guys massively put me to shame. It's unbelievable the amount of stuff you guys churn out. I don't know how you do it and still work and still have like family lives as well. It's bonkers, to be honest with you. So yeah, for me that, and I've said it before, but I'm very proud to be part of it as well. It is great, and what Dave and Chris have built from scratch is phenomenal, really. I take my hat off to you guys. I take my hat off to everyone who's involved, not just the 5 people on this call. 6 people. No, it is 5, isn't it? Sorry, I can't even count. 5 people. But everyone else, I can't name them all, but in one heap. But just phenomenal bunch of people. Everyone's really nice, and it's the best people you could hope to find. It really is a wonderful thing to be part of, and I'm very grateful for that as well.
I will say, Max, that with your confidence thing, you partly Steve J. Ray, but I will say you yourself are responsible for me reading more Marvel and DC. Like no one else. Like legitimately, from obviously reading Star Wars comics, I read a smidge of bits and pieces here, but because of your show and how much I loved listening to you talk with other individuals about how great a certain comic was, and because of how excited I was to get on your show and talk about certain things, it really made me read more. Because of you, I've bought certain Batman comics and read a lot of Marvel stuff, and it's reignited, because I was like Chris, a lot of my Spider-Man was kind of the catalyst, Spider-Man games on the PS1, that sort of jazz, and that kind of made the comic adjacent knowledge. But your show genuinely inspired me to read comics that weren't just Star Wars comics. So it genuinely hats off to you, not just because of the passion, but because of the knowledge and things. And I know you don't necessarily think you add anything to the table, but like some of the conversations you say certain things, even in the conversations you and I have had on some of the pods we've done. And I'm like, I never thought about that, or some of the connective tissue. So I'd say the way maybe you hear Tony talk when he talks about something, you are genuinely up there with him with some of the insight that you have and some of the knowledge. So I would say as a friend, but actually genuinely as a fan, I really love hearing you talk about these things, because your passion and also your knowledge does really come through in the podcast you've done, both on the nerdy like comic side of things, but also with the mandatory music and CD, which is still an output you have, which I really, really appreciate that as well.
Oh, thank you. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Tony.
Yes.
Highlights of the pod.
I want to echo that first. I love hearing Max talk. I think that like when we did the draft, Paul just started the draft, and we did the sidekick draft. That was such a joy. And we Paul was, that's the beautiful thing about Paul and the Super Dummy show, is like he genuinely doesn't know anything and he's just open to learn. But we had such a nerdy time, and I don't remember what it was. We were like, blah, 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 I've got my Captain America shirt on. We were both just like saying the name of the issue that it was on and all this stuff. And Paul was just like, Jesus Christ. So it wasn't like we were trying to like one up each other. It's just what it was. It's just like two people who, I mean, I'm older than you, but like, I feel like we had that same kind of lived experience of that, and I think it's just because I'm a teacher and it's my job to talk about stuff, I'm more comfortable with it. But I totally get the imposter syndrome thing. So I appreciate more Max. I'm here for more Max. Truly, I'm a weird introverted guy who's a fake extrovert, like most teachers are. And it's exhausting, right? You got to come home and decompress. And that's why moving online was good for me, but also isolating. So this has just been, so for me, the highlight is just this. It's just everything. Like when you think about the weird, you talked about the Venn diagram, Max, like the weird way that, so you and I both knew Steve before we knew each other. You and Chris meet randomly, right? And so now here all five of us are, because I hear Mike's thing. I met Tanya because I heard her on Mike's show, and I was like, man, I know who that is. Like I'd never met her before, and I was like, I need to reach out to her. And now, she and I have edited a book together that's coming out this year with a lot of the Comics in Motion family people writing essays in that book. And we've got another one that's coming up. So it's like, it's crazy to me. So just like the way that my life has changed in a real, truly in a real way, like just because of you guys. So to me, that's it. It's like, whatever the thing is you, but when we were just waiting for everybody to come on, Chris and I were on, we're just chit-chatting about him going to Vegas, and I know so much about him, and I feel like I've never met Jordan, but I feel like I know her. I've never met Sam. You know what I mean? It's like, you sent me that picture the other day, Max, of Sarah's Scrabble board.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it's like I have these like genuine friendships. So to me, like all the podcasting is great. Mike and I getting to interview, like a highlight on the show. Mike and I got to interview one of our heroes, one of our comic book writing legends, did we not? Mark Russell.
Oh yes, he was delightful. He was so cool. We were just like, I read a comic. Toby was like, you would like this comic, and I read it. I was like, that's cool. Should we just do loads of other comics by him? Yeah. I was like, this guy knows what he's doing, and then we got to actually talk to him. I was like, what?
I know. So it's like, and like you, I mean, you got to interview Gavin, and it's like all these things. Like, so it's just like the world is crazy, and it's honestly because of you guys. Like, I can genuinely say, like, I have in my phone Brenna Thumler's number. I can send her a text. It's because of this. She, Kelly Sue DeConnick and I will text each other every once in a while. What the hell? That's nuts. And it's this. It's all because of this. But it's like, those people are great, and they're genuinely awesome people. But you guys are like my friends. So to me, it's just like the world has expanded. I mean, you guys, Allison Chilton has written and directed film. Like, she's our friend, and she's like, you know what I mean? Like, she went to grad school with, I will not say, just a lot of people. She went to USA Film School. There may be somebody who maybe changed Mike's life, who also went to USC Film School. She went to the same film school as George Lucas. I mean, that's somebody we know. It's crazy. So the world is awesome. Yeah, I'm just thrilled. I can't say it enough. I echo. This has been a life changer.
Well, as we are, I know that Tony and Max, you have hard cut-offs, and I know that Chris has an early bedtime. Me and Dave would go until midnight probably, but I thought the perfect way to wrap this up is to wrap up our final questions. There was a couple of questions that I loosely skipped over. It was like, what's your biggest challenge, things like that, but we'll keep it positive. But I wrote this question down, and then Math commented the same question, so I think this is what we'll end it on. So this is, if you could interview one person from nerd culture, dead or alive, who would it be? And what I'll say here is, just so we don't lose people and make people like panicking to go, we'll go to Max first. But Max, if you want to first of all give us your plugs, last sort of comments and things, and then your kind of final word can be who would you interview or have a conversation with on the podcast of anyone from nerd culture. We'll go to you first, then we'll go to Tony, and then we'll do the other three in case you guys need to dip out mid-part.
Okay, sure. Well, you can find me on Twitter at MaxyByrne, which is spelled MaxyByrne. There's links there to the various websites I write bits and pieces for, so check those out by all means. Do say hi. In terms of who I'd love to interview above anyone else, it has to be one man. It's Sensei Steven Seagal. It would just be the best interview ever, just to actually understand the man. You know, it's easy to dismiss him now as some morbidly obese Putin ally with something ridiculous on the top of his head, but 30 years ago he was a badass, and whether it's true or not remains to be seen. Whether it's all fake, I don't know, but I would love to get under the skin of the man, away from the bullshit, and have a one-on-one conversation with him about his work with the CIA, allegedly, his black ops for the CIA, his wet work, his assassin work, the fact that he's taught the finest fighters on whoever walked this planet how to better the techniques. I'd like to know all about that, and about his early films, because I'll say it till literally the day I'm in a box. I'll put his first 5 films up against anybody else's first 5, and Seagal will win. That's all I have to say about that. You can't compete. Obviously, since then, it's been fucking awful. Everything he does now is one big pile of shit.
Apart from Machete. Machete's the last decent film I think he was in.
Yeah, no, I'll give you that one, definitely. Yeah, but everything else is fucking embarrassing, and it's a disgrace to the man that he's let himself go to the extent that he has. When you look at other men who were older than him, like Schwarzenegger and Stallone, and they're still at least in shape and still trying to do good work, whereas Seagal looks like he looks like a pantomime dame these days. So it would be. He does, doesn't he? He does. So that would be my go-to. If I could sit down and talk to anyone, it would be Steven Seagal.
Phenomenal. And that little burst of max passion, that's what I love. Maximum passion. That's the key. That little thing there, I was getting flashbacks to Back to the Filmography. I'm like, at least you got a regular Expendables spot there. I've been loving that. I've not seen the Expendables, but I love every time you're on Back to the Filmography. It's fantastic. So, Tony, plugs and who you interview, dead or alive.
Plug arfarina.com is the one-stop shop to get me. You can get to social media, my book, anything cooking there. Max will appreciate this. It would be the person who, and I mean this sincerely, art changed my life. I grew up in this small town, tiny little Whitey Nick Whitenberg town in Southwest Michigan, and it wasn't until I discovered the writings of one Mr. Dennis O'Neil that everything changed. Denny O'Neil, comic writer. We covered the Hard Traveling Heroes, Max, and seriously, he changed my life. Like, literally, Heath and I say all the time, he like raised us. Like, we learned how to be people from Denny O'Neil. So I that would be the person I would it would mostly be like it'd be totally Chris Farley show. Hey, Denny, remember that time when Ollie and Hal almost punched each other? That was cool. Remember when you invented Jon Stewart? He was my favorite Green Lantern. Hey, that's what it would be. But I love him. Literally changed my life. I saw the whole new world through art, through comic books. So that'd be the person.
Amazing. And go check out Tony's book as well, Welcome to Mansfield. As if someone who has never read, in the last decade, has not read any books that are non-Star Wars, that was the first one. And I love it. And it literally expanded my mind now to read other stuff. So Welcome to Mansfield, Till I Die. Okay, then, Chris, if there's anyone you could interview loosely in nerdy culture that you'd want to have on the show, and then also your sort of last plugs and things.
Now, the person I want to interview, I don't know if you cast it as nerdy. It's nerdy for me, but there's only one person, Mike, that I want to interview. Oh, no. Well, Tony, there's no point in Lauren Avedon because you are Lauren Avedon. We've seen the pictures. You've never been seen in the same room together. After them pictures of you as a youngster, I was going to say Lauren Avedon. It's unbelievable how much you look like my hero and how much I fantasized about you, Tony. I mean, Lauren, over the years. But anyway, no, for me, it's got to be Burt Reynolds all day long, Smoking the Bandit. How you can be so cool with a porno tash, driving a Trans Am, in flares with Sally Field in a wedding dress. I need to know what fucking happened to make that, to make that guy who he was. He was my all-time hero.
Even Megan knows him. And she doesn't know anyone. She often mentions Burt Reynolds in random conversation. That's how epic his tash is.
She knows. It's one of my, I don't know what it is about him. I love his movies. I love there's some proper shit ones. Or like Mike said, there's some proper shit ones. There's stuff like Mean Machine or Longest Yard, as it was called over in America, Tony. But great movies. White Lightning, Gator. We've not done them yet, Dave. We will be doing them at some point in the VHS. But it's Smoking a Bandit, the Cannonball Run all day long. I love Burt Reynolds. He's just a legend. And Hooper as well. Absolute legend. So I just love to talk about his life. Because he was actually, you talked to me and Tony before we came on, he was a failed American footballer, but he went through his whole movie life wanting to be a stuntman. And that's why his best friend was Hal Needham, who he made Smoking the Bandit and that. And he actually got injured, Burt Reynolds. He used to do his own stunts. And he ended up with a dependency on painkillers. And that's why he's bollocked through the 80s and that. But yeah, he wanted to be a stuntman. That's why he did Hooper and that. So he loved stuntmen. He would try and do all these stunts. So I don't know what it is about him. He just wanted to be a man's man, I suppose. Even though he was on screen, in real life, he wanted to be. So I find it fascinating about his character, to be honest.
Wasn't Hal Needham the guy who choked out Steven Seagal as far as legend goes?
No, that was Benny. Benny, he just died. Benny, he's a judo guy. Oh, Benny, he made Steve. He made Steve. Yeah, that's it. He made Steven Seagal shit his pants. Actually, Dave. That's the story, I believe.
Oh,
that's true. That. Clean. Yeah. Sorry, but that's not a Chris Phelps story. That's apparently true.
And where can people find you online, Chris?
On Twitter, I've now changed my name to CD Reality Chris, and on all podcast catching up with my good friend Dave on Chris and Dave's Reality TV cast, the VHS Strikes Back. Occasionally, I come back as a testimonial for the Comics in Motion, which will be coming more regular.
I'll get you in. I'll get you in this year.
Got him, mate.
Year of the collaborations. I've wound down Comics in Canon to do more collabs, and that includes you, Max. I'll drag you into a few as well. Fear not, we'll do a lot. Then Dave. Final plugs, and who would you interview, dead or alive?
So I guess X or Twitter, Seattle Dojos. I don't tend to post. I tend to more lurk there these days. And all the podcasts that Chris mentioned, trying not to be sleazy and think about interviewing Margot Robbie with some fine wine and Belgian chocolates. But if you get that reference... You are a very, very niche of the niche. But you know what? Matt even put it in the question about Stan Lee and, being realistic. But I think he anchored that. He impregnated my brain with Stan Lee because honestly, for me, I don't think I can think of anyone better. Someone who lived such a long life, seeing the world through these times, through the 20th century, and how things changed, how world events changed. And he was such a great storyteller. I mean, kind of verbally, obviously, he's got his comics work and people have got different opinions about that. People have got different opinions about how original is his stuff, and what actually came from other people. But I think just to be in a conversation with the guy, whether it was true or not, he's just a brilliant storyteller. So, I just think I can't look past Stan Lee myself. And I was gutted, obviously, when we were doing the podcast. I remember it was around about the time he passed. podcast, and I think we were doing Fantastic Four, the unreleased Corman, and I remember getting quite choked. I was quite upset about that. So yeah, Stan Lee for me.
I think Stan Lee is one of those people that, regardless of how much credit he does or doesn't get, the thing you can't deny is A, his impact, and B, his passion. Even when he was near the end, you hear him talking at Comic Cons, you hear him talking about Spider-Man, and he always says he wanted Spider-Man to be this age, this young, for people of this. And regardless if you give him credit for taking this idea from whoever, whatever, Stan Lee was a passionate nerd. And without him, and loads of other people as well, without him, comics and even pop culture wouldn't be where it is today. So he's undeniably important, and I'm sure he was a lovely guy, even if there was some maybe light plagiarism, but let's not delve into that.
I think if I could just throw out, I think the biggest thing for me was just understanding kind of sales and marketing. Understanding that when someone picks up a comic, it might be their first comic, so you kind of have to re-explain things, but also you want to get to the end and what's going to happen next week. So, to make you want to do that. People over history have probably produced amazing pieces of artwork and stories and stuff, but if you're not out there doing the hard sell, no one's going to fucking read it. So that was the biggest thing or the biggest impact for me that he had.
Amazing. And then for me, I'm at Genuine Chit-Chat and all the usual social media places. And my favourite, the number one person I've spoken openly about this, and a friend of the show has given me their agent details, but I'm waiting to see if hopefully my podcast can become big enough that I can make it worth their while. But Sam Witwer, he is a person who played Starkiller in the Force Unleashed games, Galen Marek. He also voices Darth Maul in the animated shows. He does a lot of Star Wars voice work, and he is the only Star Wars actor who's ever participated in a Star Wars trivia contest and won. He was in the Schmodown at Dragon Con in 2018 or something, and he beat Star Wars Explained. He is the biggest Star Wars nerd you can imagine. He's so passionate. He does do other acting as well, but he is incredibly passionate about these things. It's one of my tattoos is of The Force Unleashed. It's a game that my dad got me that I'd never heard of, and it's my favorite video game ever. So there's a connection to my dad. He's an undergrad. He's not the first actor people think of when they think of Star Wars, but he's a big old nerd, and that would be my absolute Star Wars dream and nerdy dream, would be to interview him. But we've come to the end. We could, I'm sure, all talk for 2 more hours because this is almost the abridged version. So maybe we'll have to do another one of these next year or something. But this is the wrapping up.
1,000 more. What are you talking about?
1,000 more. We'd do it. Let's do it. No, this isn't the end. This is chapter 1. Okay, this is Batman Year 1. Okay, and think about all the other amazing Batman stories that came out after that. Wait until we're all really old, and then we can do a Batman Returns.
Books, 5 years
Dark Knight
is
Returns.
1 year.
Yeah, exactly. Many years to go of the Comics in Motion family. But, I want to say personally, thank you to Chris and Dave. Chris, I know you give Dave all the credit, and although Dave may have been the Stan Lee of the story, the marketing guy, the guy who put some of the ideas together, I'm sure he would admit this quietly when you're not around, but he couldn't have done it without you. It's one of those things that both of you are incredibly important to this entire family. Obviously VHS Strikes Back spun off essentially from Comics in Motion as well. And this foundation couldn't be there without you. The collaborations we've done, the friends we've made, all those sorts of things, it's because of you. And you've really helped foster my nerdy, the side of myself that's nerdy that some of my friends don't care about or society didn't give a shit about, but really that nice safe space where we can all be nerds together and enjoy shit we love together. And that's really all we want to do. We don't all like the same thing, but we all want to just like things. So, a personal thank you from me letting me do Star Wars Comics in Canon and the numerous other podcasts and things like that. It's just been an absolute delight. Tony, any final words?
No, I say the same. You are our Jack Kirby. And I appreciate that, man. So it really does, or Ditko, whichever one you want to be. I just appreciate it. No, seriously, you guys.
Ditko is closer.
Yeah, Ditko is closer.
I missed my chance. I should have just gone with
Tony.
You are the Ditko.
I'm rubbing my shoulder as you say.
Yeah. No, seriously, everything Mike said. This has just been a treat, and so thank you, and to 1,000 more, lads.
1,000 more and more collaborations. We'll do it.
Can I just add one thing before we go, Mike? because I've been missing for quite a while, on and off, and I am around, can you write a comic so it makes sense why I've not been around like the movie?
I'm on
Makes sense, you know what I mean? Yeah. We need a backstory. We need a full backstory.
We still have the dream, you guys. There's still a Hangman script waiting to be made.
I was thinking about that the other day.
I was thinking about it.
Well, let's make that happen. That was
let's do it.
A riot that nobody really knows what happens, but I wrote a script during COVID where we were all going to shoot our own scenes at home, and then Chris was going to edit them together. And I shot my scenes, Steve shot his scenes, and Scott did two different parts. So I have those videos. I don't know if they're somewhere, but the dream would still be to make the Hangman, where Chris and Dave, or Mike and Dave, played buddy cops, and Chris was a villain. And at the end, I won't give the end, but we'll find out if Chris, he kills me in the opening scene of the movie. So it was it was when you guys would do, I don't remember what movie you were doing, Samurai Cop, and you're like, they're not even in the same room. So I'm like, I'll just write my own movie. So I'll write a comic that explains where Chris has been, and then if I do that, we'll do Hangman.
Gotta do it.
Yeah,
I'm 100%.
So 2024, year of the collabs. 2025. Year of the Hangman. We'll have
Hangman's
to,
back.
We'll try and do it.
Hangman's back, baby.
As best as we can.
You're the one who named it that too, Chris. You're like, I want to be the Hangman. I'm like, why? It sounds cool. I'm like, done.
Well, I've got better editing now. I'm better at editing. I do it literally a part of work. So I've got brand new movie video editing, so I'm ready for it.
Okay, I'm making it happen.
What my idea was, you love this, was just, I started editing what we'd already done, was just throwing in random stock footage from different cities around the world. That's fuck all to do with the movie.
Yeah, that was all the transition scenes.
Shit.
So we'll make it happen. The Hangman cometh.
And we'll wrap this up, but Chris or Dave, one of you has got to say the final word of this amazing 1000th episode spectacular. So I think Chris has just said some stuff. So I think Dave, as the official podfather of Comics in Motion, the 1000th episode, the year one of Comics in Motion is complete. What are you going to take us out with, sir?
Well, there's only one thing I can really say, but before I say that, I will say just thanks to you for hosting tonight. It's been brilliant. You do a stand-up job every time. It's been great to reminisce, and so grateful for you guys being involved, but also to the wider family as well. It's just one of the proudest things that I've ever done. And I just absolutely love it. And even though we're not, creating shows as regularly, I still listen. It's great. You two in particular, Mike and Tony, you're just so, consistent and pumping out content every week. But what I was going to finish off with is say, Chris, how are you going to take us out today?
I knew you were going to say that. So what I'm going to say is simply, it has been an amazing 5-year journey, and I am back now. And when you have been the podfather, Dave, and the thing is, it's like any gangster movie. You can only be the podfather for so long. So watch your back, my friend, because I will be taking the helm very soon, okay? Ooh. But other than that, we are back. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Dave, as well. And Max, it's been, and everyone else who contributes on the Comics in Motion platform. It is amazing. But yeah, Dave, the Hangman cometh, my friend. That's all I'm going to say. Goodbye.
There can be only one.